city manager. So we're going to start with fire?
We're going to start with fire.
Do you want to say anything before we start?
No, just, thank you so much to everybody. I think we're doing in great shape. As mentioned previously, we kind of fast-tracked the budget cycle by about a month so we could really have both sides of the city budget with the school and the city side. And we're rocking and rolling. I think we're making good progress. We've got I think the school next week on Tuesday. That'll be a very big portion of the budget, so we're excited to get that number plugged in and field some questions here. And then we've got Public Works next week. There are a couple, we continue to refine and iterate and look into the budget. So so next week I'm working with Public Works now. We're probably going to have just an insert swap on Tuesday that we'll give you for their piece. We're not going to change the page numbers. We're going to wait to do the end of that, so we're not going to change your whole book. But there was just some, with the administration piece coming back in and a third funding and some of the other pieces relative to the bonding and how we count that, some of the numbers changed around a little bit, and I wanted to make sure that just we have the most accurate. So we'll update it online. We'll get you a new insert. It's one of the most complicated budgets that we have, so we've just made a little progress there. So just a note on that. And then it's similar with the fire department. The chief and I have talked about. So as we've seen and we talked about the first time around, when we added an EMS service with the fire department, it predictably raised costs. And Chief and I and members of his team have been working together on a bit of a presentation to give a little more background to council that previously, gave policy or direction to add 1.5 firefighters per year. We're getting towards the end of that to make full shifts on everything, but, the previous council directive doesn't necessarily carry, and there's new members here that weren't a part of those initial discussions. As we talked around, there's been a pretty big jump in fire department budgeting. We're going to kind of talk in general about some of the background behind the reason for the shift change and kind of how that relates to cost, and go a bit into some of the top lines on some potential part-time ideas, full-time ideas for funding, but then we also still have to do some work on the line items themselves. So hoping to kind of stay away from the deep dive into every specific line item, department request, manager request, and a little more high level on the fire department budget this time. And we'll probably come back at the last meeting with a reorganization there. So apologize both on the public works side and fire department side. We had a lot of changing things. We want to get them right. So that's just kind of two programming notes. And with that, I'll send it over to the chief for his presentation.
Good evening.
Hi.
So what I gave out to you is after the city manager and I had a meeting last week and this week and started going over some different items. What I've handed out to you was the traditional narrative that previously we used to hand out, but I went through and I made, kind of explained all the different lines and everything, but I've just in previous, like we did before, what we asked for in years past, what we're asking for this year, and what the difference is, the plus or minus, or if there's no change. So I redid those today based on a conversation that I had with the city manager to reflect the new budget proposal that I put out, which I also handed to you guys today in the spreadsheet format. Obviously, that's not reflected in Cassell. So there was a significant reduction in what I did with the budget this afternoon after our meeting. So the other part of that, and we can dive into that after, is like the city manager said, he just wanted me to do a quick presentation, kind of some foundation, especially for the new council members that aren't overly familiar with what's transpired over the past 5 or 6 years as far as the growth in the fire department. So if you want to move to the next slide, please. So in years past, prior to 2018, county ambulance used to provide ambulance service for the city of Ellsworth. There was approximately 45 years, was it 40 years they provided service to the city?
Oh, yeah.
At no cost, is my understanding. There was no cost to the city from county ambulance.
I didn't think that was true, but go ahead.
It is true. They tried to charge us, and we said no.
Good old days.
Seriously?
Yeah. So with that being said, when they went out of business in August of 2018, it put the city in an awkward position because now there was no EMS provider for the city. And there was a process that took place, this was prior to me, with Capital Ambulance, and an agreement was made where they were able to step in. In that process, Capital Ambulance was acquired by Northern Light, and that's how we wound up with Northern Light. So during that process, we had an incident here in town where we had a fatality here pretty close to the hospital, pretty significant incident. The fire department and the city recognized that we needed to start doing EMS first response here in the city. Part of that trigger is the fact that the fire department never used to go out on medical calls unless they were requested by county ambulance for manpower. So the incident that happened with the fatality was related to the fire department didn't even know what was going on. So that's how that transpired. City and the fire department recognized that. They went through a licensing process and became a non-transporting first responder service, which means what you've seen in the past with the fire truck going on every single medical call in the city was exactly what the city was obligated to do, is to run every medical call in the city as a first responder, and then continue with the Northern Light contract to maintain transport capability. And that has continued on for the past, when I got here in 2021, we signed a formal contract with Northern Light that was for 3 years, and then it extended for an additional year last year. So, as far as staffing with the ambulance, the fire department goes, the staffing for the fire department downstairs up through 2018 was 3 people per shift. And then between 2015 and 2019, there was a slow addition of additional person per shift. I know in the past there was a significant request, but ultimately by 2019 they had 4 people per shift on 3 different shifts. COVID came, we maintained that. I arrived here in 2021 and the chief that was outgoing had already gone through the budget process and requested to start adding the fifth person per shift, which is what we've been continuing to do so. So if we go back to that period of 2019, between 2019 moving forward, we've seen obviously the call volume for the fire department going up because now we were doing every single emergency call in the city to include nursing homes and urgent cares. We couldn't exclude those. So we've seen it become a significant increase in what we're required to do every day. As I was discussing, staffing adjustments in 2020, we were up to four persons per shift, covering 3 shifts. Our crews were working 48-hour shifts, and then they were going home for 4 days. And then they were coming back for 48 hours and going home for 4 days. We started working on that a little bit, trying to add additional people. We started adding the 5th person per shift, and I was able to work with council and slowly build up the shift coverage to 5 people per shift. One of the biggest problems we were having is both myself and the city manager at that time felt that as the call volume started to increase, there was going to be a component to safety with people being up for extended periods of time beyond 24 hours and driving commercial vehicles and potentially putting themselves and potentially others at risk. So we worked out a program and we worked with the fire department, we worked with the city manager, we worked with the union, and we were able to, as we increased our staffing to 5 per shift, we made a shift to a 4-shift schedule, and we went backwards. So we went back to 4 people per shift on a side letter agreement. We went to 4 people per shift across 3 shifts. We had 3 people on the 4th shift, and the fire inspector voluntarily covered that 4th shift to make sure that we could run all 4 of those shifts. And that alleviated those extended hours that those guys were working. So 2023 is when we made that transition. In the spring of 23, there was another incident here in town, and at the request of the city manager, he requested that we go forward and purchase a new ambulance. So that was pushed forward. We purchased a new ambulance in the spring of 23. We did not increase the staffing to cover that ambulance. We just moved staffing from a fire truck over to the ambulance and continued to operate as we continue to do currently. We continue to operate with crews going back and forth between a fire truck and an ambulance. So there is no additional staffing in place currently that covers just the ambulance by itself. So one of the other things that we had been doing is Northern Light was required to have mutual aid. Mutual aid means that when Northern Light's not available, that they have to put a request out to another ambulance service to come into the city. Well, getting to know this city and this area, the closest ambulance services that are available are going to Peninsula Ambulance down in the Blue Hill Peninsula, Bar Harbor, Northwest, or we start getting out to Scoot. So anytime that there was an ambulance call in the city and Northern Light was not available, it could be upwards of 20, 25 minutes that our fire truck was sitting on scene waiting for an ambulance to come to take that patient and then transport that patient to the hospital, which could be another 10 minutes or so. So conceivably, some of these people were waiting at their residences to get to a hospital upwards of an hour, depending on where the ambulance is coming from if Northern Light was not available. This is another reason why Ellsworth followed this route, is for the benefit of the citizens of Ellsworth, being able to transport them immediately if Northern Light's not available, cut down on that extended wait time for them getting to the hospital. So, when it comes to that mutual aid service, Peninsula Ambulance was the primary ambulance service to come into the city. In 2023, they came to Ellsworth 75 times. We had a point, at one point, the Peninsula Ambulance Corps came to the city of Ellsworth and was demanding that we pay them for them coming into the city to cover Northern Light. We were able to work with them and make them work with Northern Light. As at the end, it was determined it was Northern Light's responsibility for any form of funding that had to do with Peninsula Ambulance and not the city of Ellsworth. When we took over the ambulance coverage, Peninsula Ambulance significantly went down, and in 2024, they only came to the city 5 times. However, Ellsworth did 111 transports in 2024. So what's been demonstrated over a period of time is the call volumes are increasing, but the use of mutual aid ambulances is increasing at the same time due to their lack of availability. So it's increasing the workload downstairs. It's taking those 2 guys that are on the ambulance basically effectively out of service. They're no longer available for a fire response when they're transporting to the hospital. So this goes back to that. We haven't changed our staffing to accommodate a service that we've added to the city. Currently, our current staffing right now is 2 shifts of 5 people. Again, over the past few years, working with the council and with the city manager, we've been able to add 1 to 1.5 people over the past few years to bring us up. So we now have 2 shifts that are back up to the 5 firefighters per shift, and we have 2 shifts that have 4 personnel per shift. What that equates to is basically we have 3 firefighters on a fire engine and 2 firefighters on an ambulance all the time when we have a 5-person shift, and we run 2 and 2 when it's a 4-person shift. Just to kind of put it into perspective, the incident we had for a discussion on Monday night, that would not have happened had we been running a 4-man crew. We wouldn't have been able to achieve the goals that we achieved with that particular incident had we just had a 4-person crew. We had a 5-person crew, and they were very effective, and that's been the primary goal, is to make us an effective fire department. So I know over years past we've talked about OSHA's 2 in and 2 out. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but ultimately what it means is that anytime one of our firefighters puts an air pack on and enters a building, we have to have 2 people outside in case there's a problem with those 2 people that go inside, and it's a requirement. And so on our 5-person shifts, we're able to meet that on a regular basis, even if the ambulance is out on a call, because myself or the deputy are also qualified, so we help them meet that standard. When we drop down to 4, it becomes a lot more difficult with that, because we're taking 2 people out of the picture, and then both of us are now required to go if we're not tied up on something else. So it kind of, just that 1-person difference makes a huge response change. Decline in volunteers. You've heard this discussion over many, many years. When I arrived here in 2021, this number carried over. We had 8 volunteer firefighters. Only about 2 were active. And this has been an ongoing problem here in the city. It's been on a steady decline since about 2015, where they had 37 firefighters, and now we're down to, effectively, we're down to 4. So there's just been a steady decline. It's not an Ellsworth problem. This is a nationwide problem that we've been fighting, which is why we aggressively pursued that volunteer grant. One, to help the city of Ellsworth see if we could promote, and we brought on a couple, but also to help our neighboring communities boost up their volunteer ranks, which ultimately helps the city of Ellsworth because we rely on our neighbors. Again, just revisiting, increased ambulance runs, strained fire department resources. It just ultimately comes down to staffing and availability. We've already discussed this too in each route, so you can move forward. So I'm going to refer back to that incident that we discussed on Monday. Those 5 guys that were operating along with the 2 command staff being so effective, we still had to wait 15 minutes for more firefighters to show up. So we had a long period of time that we were operating by ourselves before any help could arrive on scene. So that's in terms of what we do, that's a significant wait time for things to go bad and not be able to control those incidents. As far as EMS expansion and grant limitations, first we'll talk about the EMS part. Northern Lights contract is due this year. They have not approached us yet in order to renew that contract. We anticipate that. The last discussion we had when she was in with the city manager is that they hadn't approached anybody yet this year, but they'd be working on it. And, I would anticipate seeing something in May. So it kind of puts us in an awkward position. I've pressed them, since we're in budget cycle, I've pressed them repeatedly to give us some numbers, but they have yet to do that. So increased transport requests from Northern Light to cover calls. As of today, Ellsworth has done 34 transports in place of Northern Light. If we had to move forward in the future, this is not what I'm asking for right now, but if we have to move forward in the future, we would need an additional 8 to 9 people in order to staff a second ambulance and have a manager to be able to operate that. My request this year, as we're going to go over here in a little bit, is just for the 1.5 to bring all 4 shifts back up to 5 people per shift and allow us to remain effective. We've talked about, in years past, we've talked about the SAFER grant. We did get the SAFER grant the first time when it came to volunteer recruitment and retention. We've been turned down twice when it comes to the hiring of firefighters. It's a very competitive grant. We're competing against other departments that are exactly like us. So I'm not competing with Portland. I'm not competing with Bangor. I'm competing with Orono. I'm competing with Old Town. All those departments that are identical to us all across this country, that's what I'm competing against. And last year there was only a little less than $500 million available across the country for us to get a little piece of that pie. So we've been turned down twice. I would recommend, and it's in my narrative, that we continue to try and apply for that grant and see if we can finally get an opportunity to use that. That grant allows us 3 years of payroll opportunity to be able to cover those firefighters. There's no mandate that you keep them. However, it gets your foot in the door to get that staffing here and started and start being able to build moving forward. At some point, I would like to get permission to move forward with continuing to reapply for those grants to try and get funding for additional firefighters moving forward. The other thing that, I'm sure all of us are aware right now, federal budget and the uncertainties of whether they're going to fund grants moving forward or how they're going to fund grants moving forward. So that's a wait and see on our side of things. Overtime and EMS service reliability. Ellsworth has a policy of a 4-person minimum. In the past, there never was one. But when we took on the ambulance, we set a minimum staffing standard with the personnel downstairs. So at all times, there has to be 4 people on shift. They can't drop below that. That's not the recommendation. The recommendation is to have 5 people on shift, but we're not going to force overtime to maintain 5, but we will force overtime to maintain 4. That's our minimum staffing policy. The only time that force takes place is for sick time or injury coverage. One of the big things that has come to light, and it's been past couple of years, it's been a big issue, has been the amount of overtime the fire department has been using, especially in terms of sick time. That sick time, there's a lot of injury time that's in there. Over the past 2 years, I've had multiple people that have had greater than 3 months worth of injury, which has caused a lot of overtime. We've been trying to cover it, but if we drop the minimum staffing, that's what's causing the force. And so when I've got other shifts that only have 4 people, it instantly requires a force hold. The impact, obviously, is the high overtime costs, but there's also a personal impact on the crews downstairs. If they're repeatedly being forced, there's a level of burnout that comes with constantly being forced to work past your 24 hours. And if it's repeated, then we start getting into morale issues and potential loss. You know, if people get tired of being forced all the time, we don't want to lose them. So we're trying to find some alternatives to be able to alleviate this problem and retain, because we have a really good group of firefighters downstairs. Obviously, it's well known, there's some concerns with Northern Light. Some of it's subjective, some of it, you know, we're looking at some other things in other areas, and you know, the question is the writing on the wall? But, you know, the facts are the facts, and right now Northern Light is still in play, and we're going to continue to try and work with them as much as we can. Currently, our operational staff, as I stated, I got 2 shifts of 4 and 2 shifts of 5. That puts us with 18 people downstairs. Daily staffing is approximately 1 person above the 2019 levels. So if we go back to what I was talking about 2019, we were running 4 personnel per shift. That's basically where we are now, with the exception of those two shifts that we finally moved up to 5 last year. So call volume obviously has been going up. It went up a little bit from 23 to 24, but if you take a look 2018 to 2024, you're going to see a significant increase. And just a reminder that 2019 is when we took over EMS. So you're going to see a chart here that's going to show you that dramatic change from fire calls to EMS calls and that correlation to the total call volume. So you can see if you're moving from left to right, 2015 is when we started that shift, moving from 3 firefighters to 4 firefighters, and it continued to go, but we were not an EMS system yet. 2018, you see the call volume just start to rise. That's when county goes out, capital comes in, Northern Light takes over. 2019, we obtain our EMS license, and you'll see that dramatic drop, that dramatic increase. 158 calls in 2019 from November to December 31st. That's 2 months that we had a license. That's our call volume for EMS. And then you'll see in 2020, the dramatic increase to 815, and it's just been on the rise ever since. And it didn't change during COVID. It continued to rise during COVID. At the same time, fire calls have gone up. They've gone up a little bit. I think there's a difference in about 100 calls if you start to look at where the averages are. But the EMS calls is obviously the greatest burden on the fire service. So, the discussion that we had today, it looks like in the next few weeks, you'll see that thing about transporting agency permitted to advanced EMT. That was last fall. As of this spring, it sounds like after the discussion today, we'll be permitted to paramedic, which means my paramedics downstairs will be able to provide that level of care to the city, which we have not been able to do since we became a transporting ambulance. So that is a huge, huge asset to the city of Ellsworth, that our first responders can provide the highest level of care before an ambulance gets on scene. So just a breakdown, just a real quick look at what 2024 looked like. You'll see 73% of our calls were EMS-related calls. This isn't just medical calls. This is inclusive of motor vehicle accidents with injuries, and those get lumped into that category. So, but again, you see that's a large portion of our daily call volume. And this is where we're at right now, just in the first 3 months of the year. We're already running right about the same. Today we effectively broke 500 calls for the year, so we're ahead of last year already. So as I discussed earlier, the paid on call, it's diminishing. I'm down to 4 people, 2 are interior certified. I've got 1 captain who's been with the city for 45 years. He's about ready to retire. Again, same discussion. The loss of the volunteer members is not new. It's not new to Ellsworth. It's common all across the country. I spent 3 years as a recruitment and retention coordinator down south, and in 3 years, I recruited over 130 firefighters, and we retained about 30 of them. It's just, that's the nature of where we're at. And predominantly it comes down to work-life balance and their ability to commit, because the volunteers have to follow the same standard as career firefighters. There's no difference for them. So this is where we wind up with large conflicts. The other part is our call volume is not conducive to volunteers. It's too busy for them. The average person can't leave for 5 or 6 calls a day from their workplace. So this is where we're losing them. The overtime component, again, just real quick, overtime's not used to cover vacation days. I've made it very clear in policy. If you can't get coverage for a vacation day, if the captains can't find coverage, they're not to approve that vacation time. They have to the captains work on finding them their coverage, or they need to do a buddy swap in order to make sure that shift is covered. But we do not force people to work for volunteer, for vacation time. Just overtime expenditure, again, the request for the additional 1.5. My hopes is that will help alleviate some of that overtime, because again, minimum staffing's 4. If I've got 5, 1 person can be off without incurring overtime. So. This is just to reiterate some of the stuff we were talking about. I don't want to dive too deep into it. The one thing to recognize in 2023, when we got our EMS license to transport, you approved me to start transporting in September of 23. We did approximately 36 calls in those 2.5 months, 3 months, very quickly, once you approved. In fact, the night that you approved us, we had a transport. That's how quickly that happened. So basically, it averaged out to about 12 transports per month. Last year, we averaged around 9.5 transports per month, and this year, we're already up to about 14 transports per month. As of yesterday, when I went to go home, we had already done 34 transports this year. So it's staying pretty steady. Just in terms of calculated hours of overtime, you can see we're already up to approximately 300 hours of forced overtime. And a lot of that has to do with sick leave, with injury leave. With 2 people out at injury at the same time, that's where that's coming from. So, there was some concern about how the overtime works. No firefighter downstairs can ever be forced to work longer than 12 hours past their shift. So we try to make sure that nobody's working a mandatory 72 hours straight if it's their in-between day. So that's part of the policy. So a real quick synopsis, the budget request for 2025 from me is 1.5 firefighters, 1 in July and 1 in January. This will bring all the shifts up to 5 per shift for all 4 shifts. My hopes is that we'll have a reduction of forced and regular overtime. The ability to run with 3 firefighters on an engine and 2 on the ambulance. That ambulance crew is able to also switch over to another fire truck if need be, which makes us a lot more effective in what our jobs are, depending on what the calls are. As we continue with the strategic planning, we need to look at what the future is with EMS transport in the city and what kind of timelines we're looking at, if we're ever going to take over the city, if we're going to continue with renewing contracts and just continue to hold where we're at now with what we have downstairs. and we're doing it. There's a lot of work to be done. I think you're gonna find a lot of voids with Northern Lights availability, which is gonna continue to increase the burden on the ambulance downstairs. So the other part of that budget, again, the contract requires a 3.5% COLA increase for the firefighters downstairs. That was part of the contract negotiations from last spring. So that's where we're at. Questions on that?
I have a couple of questions. So you're talking about 9.5 to 14 transports per month?
Mm-hmm.
Your revenue doesn't really show that.
It doesn't. So we're having an issue, one, working with the billing company, trying to get through this Medicare, Medicaid application hurdle. I started, a few weeks ago, I started reaching out to another billing company, and we haven't made headway with them, but I talked to him earlier today, and we're looking at possibly beginning of the summer to be able to try and switch billing companies so that we can get this process taken care of, because it's been a tremendous hurdle as a new service.
So they're not paying you, or they're not collecting, or what is going on?
They're what they're able to collect right now is private pay, so Anthems, the Blue Crosses, things like that.
Yeah.
A good portion of our calls here are either self-pay or they're Medicare, Medicaid coming from the nursing home facilities or other type facilities, or, you know, a lot of the population is already on main care or Medicaid anyways, so this is where our problem comes.
So they're not collecting main?
Not right now.
Medicare?
It's been one of those hurdles I've been trying to get over.
Are we still paying them? Seriously, I'm serious. We're paying them for not collecting? Do you know?
No, they only collect when they only get paid when they collect. So that's part of their contract. They only get paid when they collect.
So, I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor this, but, so if they're not, we're doing transports,
Mhm.
we're increasing the size of our force to be able to do that, but we're not getting paid for Medicaid,
Correct.
Medicare, because they're not applying, or they're not?
No,
do
we
they
have
not?
to do the application process. They don't help us at all, which is why I'm trying to go with this other billing company, because they will help navigate that process in a more expedited manner than what I can do by myself.
Okay.
So
How does it work if like Northern Lights is there, you guys are both there? Is it only who finishes the transport that gets to
Yeah,
collect?
legally, by federal law, only one service is allowed to bill a patient. So,
So while there's two services here and they're primary.
correct. Which is why when
Still
we
the-
did the billing ordinance, there was a caveat in there about us putting somebody on somebody else's truck and providing a higher level of care. We can bill the service directly. So if I have to put a paramedic on Northern Lights truck, we can actually bill Northern Light directly, because they're gonna bill the patient. But we can't bill the patient, so we bill Northern Light for our service that we provide. Just the same way that they've been working on billing us every time they get on one of our trucks. So,
Does the city of Ellsworth pay Northern Light contracts? Northern
yes,
Light?
we pay a little over $6,500 a month for
Yeah, it's 96
ambulance service. And I anticipate that to go up excessively this next go-around.
And do you know what like the percent difference would be between like how many transports Ellsworth is doing or versus Northern Light?
I would love to know, but they have not shared the data on the number of transports they do. And we've requested it. So this is not, that part is not a new problem. That happened even before I got here. We had a problem with obtaining data from from Capital and from Northern Light. It's not a
Probably
new
don't
problem.
keep it, knowing
Huh?
that. I said they probably don't keep it, knowing it's not accurate. I said that on TV, didn't I? I just did.
Did we talk about in the ALS upgrade, in their defense, like we just did have a great conversation with them today, and Maine EMS and Senator Grahowski. Thank you to Senator Grahowski, who helped, obviously the chief and our team too, to get the, when I say ALS, Advanced Life Support upgrade. So I think that will be starting soon, but wasn't there a data sharing discussion with them that we can start accessing that? I'm happy to follow up on that too. But that.
They were supposed to share their data with us. I've shared mine with them.
But I'll work with the chief and we'll follow up to get that delta between how many they're taking, how many are we taking. We're not obviously getting paid for any of really ours right now,
Yeah.
but.
Well, again, like I said, I'm trying to find a way to fix that problem as quickly as I can, because I know, just based on the call volume that we did last year, and, reimbursements are typically, 50 to 60% of what you bill is what you're gonna get back from main care or Medicaid. And so, at 111 transports last year, we've been around $50,000, $60,000 we would have
I mean, and that-
brought in for revenue.
That
So-
helps pay for the people that we need to hire to be able to take care of it.
It does, it pays for a portion of that, or it helps offset some of the costs to operate in the equipment that we put in that truck, so.
When this whole thing started, I was all for the ambulance service, but I was against thinking that we're gonna get any money for this ambulance service, because that's just the nature of the beast, and government really shouldn't be involved in business. That's my opinion. And my question to that is, what, and please don't take this in an inhumane way, but the transport, when this whole thing started, I kept hearing that the transport was where the money is, and I was against Ellsworth being in the business, okay? I'm not against providing the service for people that need help, but the transport seemed to be a focus, and it seems to be, there was some chatter about how many transports these companies do and the money in it and all that, but the money all comes from quasi-insurance companies, which is recalculating your great aunt's age 10 different ways. And so, please bear with me in this question. What happens if Ellsworth becomes an emergency ambulance service for the car accident, for this, and doesn't do transports from hospital that aren't emergencies to nursing homes and nursing homes to hospitals? I'm asking, I'm not saying anything that we shouldn't be doing it, but what happens in that case? Because that eliminates the billing issues, and maybe I'm missing something here, but if that's where the problems are and it's not an emergency, what did those places do before Ellsworth had an ambulance?
Well, I think we've been in let me go back here a little bit. I think we can go back to when we started this discussion several years ago. I have never been a proponent of anything beyond us doing 911. There is no money in 911. Let me rephrase that. Yes, there is some partial reimbursements, and like was stated, it helps offset some costs, but you're never even gonna come to balance out 50-50. And I've said that since day one. It's a service we provide to the city because the city requires, by state statute, we're required as a city to provide emergency medical services. How we do it, nobody cares, to be blunt. Whether we pay for a private service to come in here and do it, or whether we do it ourselves, doesn't matter. But we are, by statute, we're required to offer it, a provision. Same thing goes with fire protection. But I have been a big proponent that we stick with 911, and we only do 911. I have no desire to press this fire department into doing anything beyond 911 responses. We're too big of a city. We don't have the staffing. We don't have the manpower. We don't have the money to be able to facilitate doing anything beyond what we're doing already.
To be clear, 911 is the emergency calls, and these transports aren't part of 911.
The transports that we're doing are only 911. We don't do interfacility stuff. We don't do any of that stuff. If there's a call at a nursing home that we're asked to do the transport for, that is a 911 request. That is not the nursing home calling Main Coast or another facility and asking us to take somebody to a doctor's appointment or over to dialysis or anything like that. It is strictly, we only go to the emergency room. That is
Okay.
it.
All right, I thought you were talking about interfacility
No, sir.
transfers that were
No.
not emergencies.
As long as I am here, I will not condone it.
Well, that was a good clarification, thank you.
Well,
I
I
had the
didn't-
same
yeah.
assumption you did and was not following.
Yeah,
So I try to be
clear,
very clear, there is a very distinct difference between interfacility transports and 911 transports.
And we're not doing interfacility?
Negative.
We're only doing emergency calls?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
So our contract with Northern Light is for 911 calls and inter-facility?
We have nothing to do, the city of Ellsworth has nothing to do with interfacility.
Okay.
So-
We're contracting them for just 911
Correct.
calls. However, because of that, the drop in the service there, we decided to add the ambulance and EMS people. But now we've essentially got a contracted service and ourselves.
Correct.
Doing all one job.
Correct. And one's based on availability. And I know you're gonna say why.
Yeah, well, it seems like we're double dipping.
You're correct.
there.
This has been the million-dollar question. However, Ellsworth is not in a position to take over 911. And if we were to even follow that path, it's gonna cost us a little over $800,000 just in staffing to put up a second ambulance. Because if we were to do 911 service right now, we would be back in the same position we were 3 years ago with Northern Light and the lack of availability, and we would be relying on mutual aid partners, and then we'd have another ambulance service sitting in the city manager's office requesting to be paid. We're not in a position to do that, so
And lives would be at risk.
absolutely, 100%. You know, my personnel downstairs are gonna respond to every single call all the time, as long as they're available. They do a great job with it. We've got days where, and dispatch can attest to this, there are days that, you know, we have 3 or 4 calls going on at the same time, and we find a way to navigate that and make it happen. But, you know, we're getting to the point we're overstretched also, but we're making it happen. But if we get into a dedicated ambulance system, we can't do that. I think it's a huge dollar figure for the city, and we're not in a position to do that.
Yeah, and from my research here is, especially seeing that presentation and those call volumes and some of the issues that, like, there were, a stone's throw away from the hospital. A little more than a stone's throw, but pretty close. Some serious health issues without the ambulance, without its capabilities not being there. And that's, it is an expensive service, but, and in some ways it is a double when the Northern Lights is available. When they're not, you're having a heart attack. Like Castine, they have Maritime Academy, about 40 students that operate that in the fall and spring. I've got a decent chance, but I have a heart attack in the summertime and there's 1 or 2 volunteer firefighters around. Like, I'd much rather live in Ellsworth. I'm going to have a, infinitely better chance of making it out. And that's the service upgrade here. Like, and the nicer part about living in this city is you get top-notch EMS service with this expansion. They do amazing work down there. They're saving lives pretty much all the time, so.
Steve?
I think it's worth mentioning that when this started, that the city of Ellsworth was sending a large rescue truck chasing the ambulance every call.
In a manner of speaking,
Okay.
they were chasing us, but yes,
Well, okay,
semantics.
right. Okay, but there was an ambulance call.
We were still sitting on scene for long periods of time without an ambulance.
Right, okay, and so, I think the theory behind it was, in my little mind, was, all right, if we're sending personnel in a large truck to every ambulance call, why aren't we driving an ambulance to the ambulance call and work through the process over a number of years to get to be independent enough so we could handle the process on our own. And I remember at the time saying, it's just a baby step into the process, and obviously you've done well with it. But I think that was the theory, was hey, we're sending personnel anyway, what about sending them driving an ambulance with a little more training? And maybe I've got that wrong, but that's
So
my
it's-
feeling of what happened.
You're not wrong. I mean, it has helped quite a bit, and, you know, just from a general, you know, I've watched my fuel consumption go down considerably over the past 2 years. That's a huge asset. You're still getting the same, when we increased our licensure capability, now we increased our level of care before we got the ambulance, so that was a benefit. Now people were getting the next level, higher level of care before an ambulance arrived on scene. Adding the transport capability lessened the timeline from a patient seeing the fire truck pull up on scene to the time they get to the hospital, so that became a benefit. We did have a little bit of a gap there before we got our transport license and we had the ambulance, that we had a lot of concerned citizens that Ellsworth was bringing an ambulance to a scene, but we couldn't do anything with it. And that created a lot of confusion. That was one of my biggest things, is that I didn't want to put that truck in service until we had a license on it, because it was going to create an uproar in the community, because why are you sitting here with an ambulance and I can't go anywhere? We're past that now. We're past that now because we have that capability. But the cost for expanding that service is going to be tremendous. And I think that goes back to the comment I said earlier about the SAFER grant, is affording me the opportunity to continue to apply every year for the SAFER grant, because once we get that grant and are able to bring those number of firefighters in, that could be what kicks off that next step, you know, and be able to fund that in the future. But
But we haven't gotten the SAFER grant.
not yet.
You know,
And I haven't
the
applied
other
for
piece
one.
of that is once we do that and we kick another set of firefighters, we're also, you know, once the SAFER grant releases, we now have, and to me, there was a piece of this, you mentioned the baby step, and, you know, as we talked at the last presentation, I analyzed kind of what are the cost centers, what have been driving the increases in rates, and as a single department, the fire department is the biggest one. You go from 1.3 million in FY 2020, when this thing is starting off, to roughly 3 million at the department request per year. You know, Scott's latest one has it down to 2.6 million, so you're looking at every single year an additional 1.1 million in funding. You know, I think so that's, you know, and then you have capital costs, of course, of ambulances, you know, those other pieces. So, you know, it's kind of like, let's your point, you think you're swapping out an ambulance for a fire truck to be able to, but you got to go from 4 to 5 on each shift. You know, some of our most highly skilled technical employees, also some of the best benefits, and the most expensive employees in the city. So it goes from 12 in 2019 employees, now we're 18, and then to be fully staffed at 5, which is kind of close to where we're coming now, at 20. So the department kind of increases from 12 to 20. That's really, you know, that's where the cost change occurs. You know, so for me, there's like a point, and, you know, to bring it back to sort of where we're at now. You know, my manager's recommendation was to go for the 1 instead of the 1.5, although watching the presentation and kind of seeing what this piece is, like, you know, that's, you know, 1.5 or 2, seeing the overtime costs we're at, I mean, I'm kind of at the level of, like, let's do the 2 now, clear the decks, reduce this. There was a request for about 264,000 in part-time, which is off this. You know, if we have 2, a fully staffed, 5 per shift, hopefully reduce some of the overtime lines and the expectation that would go down. And also start costing this out, like, and we gotta start, you know, yes, to your point, Steve, I agree, I don't think this will ever be cost effective, but we gotta chase every dollar that we can to reimburse as much as we possibly can. The last few years have had a EMS reimbursement that has, you know, been budgeted for 15,000, but hasn't really come in much at all, so we need to change that calculus to as much as we can for reimbursements, knowing that this is never going to be cost positive. And, you know, and really kind of, I think it has been interesting to see this 1.5, 1.5, but now we're almost there. This is the fully staffed fire department with the EMS service, and really start to hold costs, because it's, you know, their overtime, you can see it, these with the 2 injuries, and that huge call volume. It's kind of a chicken or the egg thing, right? You see their call volume, and then they add this service. You know, so to your point, Steve, it's not just, well, let's change the type, they also, like, because they add the service and now we're a transport service, it like grabbed more calls. Now that the police department's gonna have a request for a dispatcher, so we're not even, so we actually had to increase our dispatch department too. So some of these costs are more broadly grabbed by public safety, and I know the police have probably seen an increase in volume of that activity, but that's kind of where we're at now. But I'd love to hear kind of councils on where we're at with adding more fire. You know, should we go to stay at the chief's level 1.2, 1.5, which is really 2, but just half budgeted this year and half next year. I'm kind of the opinion that, you know, right now, maybe at the end of this cycle, we have to dial back, and this is the first place we go because it's the most expensive, but, you know, I kind of want to see what this department's at budget-wise, at fully staffed, how we reduce the overtime.
So which number are we looking at?
So what's in your book, I believe, is what the city manager's recommendation was.
Right, but your original request was 3,089,000, and on here it's 2,591,000.
That's because I made some adjustments today, that's why.
So this is the one that we need to be looking at?
That's my proposal right there, yes, that's the one.
Okay, much better.
So this is the one that we're
$700,000
gonna,
was a lot of money.
we're gonna need to
Yes.
pull into Cassell.
But this is the one that I pulled, again, there was originally, like the city manager has stated, there was originally a request to bring in some more part-timers on a more regular basis to help offset. And I removed those out of there, and just allocate the 1.5 firefighters to bring all 4 shifts up to 5. And then I rebalanced out the overtime to kind of reflect that my overtime cost should go down. And, try and pull an average from previous years. This year's obviously an exception with the amount of injuries I've had, but you can't predict injuries.
Nancy?
I'm trying to get a cohesive order in the questions I've got, that I agree with what Charlie said. I've been trying, as we go through the budget, to look at, when we talk about half-time hires, are these half-time positions, or is this somebody we're hiring in January? And if so, let's just be, you know, I understand the logic, the budget logic in hiring somebody a half year, but if we need them, and let's do it at the, let's budget it when we actually need them. The other point, and what I'm hearing from you is that if we do hire when we need them now rather than at the half-year mark, it may pay for itself with reduced overtime. And then I keep hearing you talk about the number of injuries and wondering if they're on the job injuries, are they off the job? Are those related to the extended hours? What are we doing to address?
So the injuries are
that
related to, actually, with the number of EMS calls,
Yeah.
that's really, both of the injuries were back-related injuries
I
that
think you
were.
remember talking about, last year you talked about.
Correct. And we had another back injury this year that was directly related to a lifting scenario that was in an adverse,
I remember that.
so.
If we are hiring the 2 people that you're saying we need, are we reducing overtime and reducing injuries more broadly? And again, I know the budget is numbers, but it's also policy. It's also where we're setting things in motion. What are we doing to manage injuries? If it is lifting, if it's other issues, I'm looking at like the fitness stipend where it looks like not all the people who are eligible are using it.
Correct.
So there's,
So we've added, the incentives have been there for a long time, and it's been a part of their contract.
yeah,
However, we also do have a policy in place that they're required to do 30 minutes of cardio every shift, so that they maintain a specific level of fitness for the other stuff. The back injury prevention is a lot of training and things like that.
and I understand that sometimes.
Yeah, no.
Or a
I mean,
staircase or whatever, but.
you know, the unfortunate side of things is we try to keep our injuries down as little as possible. As the call volume goes up, we're gonna see more.
Right.
It's just,
So I'm wondering.
They
if
are
we're
preventable,
budgeting,
but-
If it is bringing 2 people on, it looks like, and again, trying to catch up with numbers as we're here, it brings down the overtime. Will it be reflected in overtime related to illnesses? Is that a way to get what we need for the department that doesn't cost a whole lot more? This is more, I think, for Charlie, but while we're here, I'm hearing that we're applying for the SAFER grants, they're highly competitive. I know you've talked about getting a grant writer in, and is there help in getting a grant writer in to help in managing, getting.
I think
getting the
there's
top
always a
notch.
benefit to a grant writer because that's what they do.
Right.
The last grant that we sent out, we did have it evaluated before I sent it out, and it came back, and we corrected a couple of things that they requested, and we didn't even make it through computer scoring. That's how competitive
But
it is.
this would be we couldn't just pay for current firefighters, we had to add new with the
Yeah, these are for new firefighters.
So to me, the danger with that is, for 3 years, that's great. But we'll see if I'm here for 6 or that, but now in year blank, we gotta cover another, if it's 3 firefighters, we gotta cover another $540,000.
Well, but I just heard you don't have to keep them, so, but just the point that,
Get
Fire.
used to.
well,
Didn't have to that serious, you're not gonna fire them.
Right.
to be clear, I'm not talking about laying off firefighters, but that it's, I'd hate to not accept 3 years of paying for them because we don't want to pay for them in years 4 through 6, but.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just at
kind of
this
like the
point-
ARPA funding, when you spend it on
Yeah.
long-term
Ongoing
costs.
expenses,
It's awesome
but-
in those first 2 years when they release, and to me, it's also part of this. But again, we don't have the
So
safer grant. If we
I'm-
get it separate, we discuss it.
And I'm just
absolutely.
going back to when we're talking about grant writing, is there a niche here? We don't need to problem solve it here, but is there an opportunity there? It sounds like you're on the billing, sounds like a critical issue, and that
Yes.
you're on that one. I guess I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Could you talk about the county's responsibility financially? Are they still funding
County's
Ellsworth?
responsibility for,
Do they partially fund, do they reimburse the city for any? Are
No.
they, you mentioned
Ca-
that some years ago they had.
so the county, it's several
That's
years.
county ambulance.
Yeah, county
That was the
ambulance,
name of the
not
ambulance
that,
Ah, okay.
yes, so.
Question still stands, I guess, is it?
No, there's not any funding from the county. The county, a couple years ago, looked at it when ARPA first came through. They were looking at possibly, because there's been numerous complaints about private ambulances services availability here in the county. The county was looking at using some of that ARPA fund to potentially start a small county-based EMS system to cover the smaller communities outside of Ellsworth. That, they found out real quick that that wasn't very feasible.
Was there there was a safer grant for, well, not for this piece, but for volunteer, but that's like a route that we've tried and we don't feel like can work in this scenario. Is that?
What do you mean? The
Was there-
volunteer recruitment and retention?
Yep. Do we have a grant for that as well?
We do. It's a $1.3 million grant that we received 2023? 2023, yeah, it's a 4-year grant. My apologies. But that was directly and can only be used for recruitment and retention of volunteer firefighters. So there's an aggressive media marketing that's going across social media and all that stuff. It helps with, if I bring in a volunteer here, it helps with me sending them to their physicals. It's a covered cost. My purchasing their turnout gear, which is a $5,000 investment. It covers that. It covers their training, all those expenses. So I don't have to pull that out of my budget. It's taken care of through the SAFER grant. We've only picked up 2 people so far since the grant came into inception. I've got 2 applications sitting on my desk for people who are interested. From my perspective, anybody that we add to this system is a bonus for us because we're just so short of volunteers here, and I'm very restrictive as far as if you're gonna volunteer for the city of Ellsworth, you need to live in the city of Ellsworth. We're too big to bring in people from outside communities on a volunteer basis. 10 miles responding to a call, everybody's going home before you even get there. So, has it helped the neighboring communities? Yes, it's helped the neighboring communities, and, they're slowly starting to pick people up, and so what does that do for the city of Ellsworth? Well, what that means is that when we go to a fire call, once they finally get to their stations and start coming to us, that means they have a bigger manpower pool to bring into the city to help the city out. So there was a win on both sides when we applied for this grant, knowing that we could potentially increase our volunteer base, even if it was, 3, 4, or 5 people, but we also knew that the surrounding communities around Ellsworth that come into Ellsworth were also bringing in these people, which increases our effective manpower pool. So we looked at it as a win-win, and it's helped out those communities quite a bit. And like I said, we brought on 2 people so far. I got a couple more people that are in the application process. If I can get them in and they're committed to what we do, that's a win for the city of Ellsworth.
So can we have, before we have to answer whether or not we want to add firefighters, so we're talking about how much the payroll is, and the overtime is down, but what about the benefits? The additional cost to the city on the other parts of the budget? I'd like to see that too.
Yeah, that's kind of what's, there's obviously this big one. We've got the school coming in next week. I've got to get this into Cassell. And to me, I've had some good conversation. To me, this is such a big part of the budget, and with those benefit pieces, kind of bringing this back at the leader point to really see where we're at with the mill rate, where we're at with the taxes, and can we go to 2? Or can we go to 1? What are the benefit cost pieces? Because that was another analysis that I did the first time around is, there is the cost to all fire department, public safety, but there's also general government in terms of the categorization holds all employee benefit costs. But if you break all employee benefit costs down, the public safety is over 50%, like 51% of all employee benefits. It's about 40 FTEs versus the other 69 or so employees. So it is a big cost that's kind of hidden in the general government side of things. So we get the breakdowns actually in your we have every single employee's benefits by position, so you can see how much firefighters cost for benefits versus the others. There's also a pie chart in the benefits section on employee public safety versus the non-union, non-public safety. But I'll get those for this fire department conversation so you can see the full fiscal impact of this as well.
Is it, and I apologize, I wasn't here, so I
Yeah.
was on vacation for the last meeting, but if we could have, because I don't want to go through this entire budget and try to figure out what this cost is and that cost is for the increases. So like if we could just have, and I think we've talked about this before, a list of what the requests are and kind of what the council is looking at or thinking that we might be able to do, and then just have that cost, just so all in one. So when we go to make the final decisions in here, we know what it is that we're actually looking at and prioritizing. It's kind of hard to prioritize, public service is, it's incredibly important, but we got, I don't know how many pages of a budget here that everybody thinks their part is important. So I just would like to be able to have it a little more focused on what the increases are and what you're recommending for the increases, and then the council can go from there with the cost.
Yep, and I think almost all of the other budget cycles are like this one. There's really not many other additional staffing requests, although except for the next one, the police and dispatch. I think you have the budgets, breakdowns on those though, Shawn, for what we've come to the management request level. So, but I'll make sure for the future presentations that they'll include that in this one coming back, that it has it as well. But besides Parks and Rec director and and a facilities director, which we'll talk about later on, those are the only other two. I'm sorry, a janitor, as opposed to paying the contract service rate. Those are the only other two FTE potentials in the budget.
Thank you. Just as a reminder to everybody that they were under an incredible amount of pressure this year not to increase, not the mill rate, but not to increase the amount people pay for taxes, which is impossible, I know. But whoever votes for this budget is going to be the ones during, that are blamed for anything that increases in anybody's taxation. So I want to be comfortable with and I don't care if the taxes go up. I'm not saying that I don't want them to, but I personally want to be very knowledgeable about what we're voting for and why that's going up and the benefit that the city is getting from the increase in taxes. I want it to be very clear and very out there, because there's a lot that's said about, the increases in the taxes, and it's kind of hard sometimes to be able to say, well, this is why, and this is what they've received for benefit by the increase in their taxes.
Yeah, we're trying to do a little more on the micro level, but it's also in the kind of cost center analysis to broaden it out too, because there's a lot of details on, 2 years ago you saw a $3.6 million increase in the levy. Last year it was around a $2 million, but really the natural rate of growth over the last 15 years is between 800,000 and 1.2 million. So, that's kind of the benchmark area for natural rate of growth. Now there's revenue sharing and things flipping back and forth, but to be able to be a little bit more, hey, if this is the increase, this is what it's for. And, I think there was a lot of good discussion tonight on this fire department piece. It was a big increase. We're seeing a lot upgraded EMS service for our citizens here, and it's a great thing, but, also doing the true costing of, how much that's affecting the taxpayer.
Thank you.
Great. We'll go to public safety next, or sorry, the police dispatch.
Thank you.
Great stuff.
Great presentation.
John, you're gonna talk more about the ambulance service in capital. Are you guys?
A little bit, yeah.
I don't know.
That's not in the fire.
No, not in this one. I mean, although if we end up approving it, I put it in fire at the end so you can track any type of capital expenses are within departments and contrast.
This is his narrative.
I think saying it'd be really nice to be able to look at a list of just the big increases.
Yeah.
These are the ones that stuck out, and
So then we can make a decision, because I don't want to go, okay, this is a firefighter for the benefits, this is how much we pay them normally, and try to go through that for everything that we're doing, and especially, other requests, capital requests, on top of everything.
We good? All right. Good evening.
You don't want me to keep talking there?
Oh, no, I didn't want to interrupt you. So, for me and the police department, obviously, things changed a little bit since I sat here last year. We've definitely moved forward quite a bit, I believe, within the police department. First thing I'd just like to bring up before we get into the fiscal part of it is just to recognize that this is our 75th year as a police department in the city of Ellsworth. We started in 1950, and obviously this is our 75th year. We've got commemorative badges that we gave to everybody, kind of just show that throughout the year. They're going to wear them through the year. And
Except the deputy.
what's that?
Where's his badge?
Well, he's got a different type of uniform. No, but since that time, so Shawn did a lot of work doing some back checking from when we started in 1950. And we came up with, we've had a total of 243 officers work for the city of Ellsworth since the time of the inception. So we're constantly moving up from there. I just thought I'd put that out there, let everybody know. So first, just getting to our budget request, I'd just like to go down a few things that we've done, a few stats that we have. And just comparing, in 2004, we responded to 4,577 calls and had 14 officers and 4 dispatches. So bumping up to 2024, we responded to 9,465 calls. We have 20 officers and 3 dispatches. And you can see we're fairly busy for the last year. And most of that year, we were down 3 officers. So our staff handled quite a few stressful calls, very efficiently, professionally. A lot of them worked many overtime hours, which you'll see reflected in our overtime budget. But most of our overtime costs come from having 3 people down in that, in our department. And they all handled calls that range from burglaries, suicide, aggravated assaults, domestic assaults, swatting, thefts, drug violations, crisis calls, overdoses, all while providing great service for the community. Since taking over in '24, did some command staff promotions, got those in place. We got together, reevaluated our what our job strengths were, what would be best for the department. We all took different tasks within the department, which resulted in being more efficient within the agency. So these promotions, we had the promotions within. We also hired 3 vacancies from starting in May. 2 of those vacancies are in the academy right now and will be graduating in May. Once they've completed, they'll complete an FTO program and should be on the road and ready to work by August or September. Our 3rd hire, which we're hoping to get hired fairly soon to fill that 3rd spot. With any luck, we can get her into the academy in August of this year. So the other thing I just wanted to touch on, when I had my interviews for this position, gave the hiring committee some goals and some stuff that we were looking forward and looking to implement within the police department, and with the help of, Shawn and Dave, through the command staff, we came up with, we did get quite a bit done, I feel. We implemented a mass notification system for our staff, make it more efficient to let us know when there's overtime, a call when we might need more people, any other type of situations within the department, that everybody get things out in a group type text situation notification. One of our goals that we talked about was embedding a mental health worker. So we have done that. We had one come in January. Olivia, from working with AMHC, I would say it's been extremely successful to date. She has been on 56 calls and has been used 27 times, just in the 3 months that she's been here, and we're on our way to hire another one, hopefully within a month or two. So the new cruiser cameras and stuff that cruiser cameras and body cams that you approved for us last year, those are all installed. We're just in the process of working any kinks out, but that's all going well, so those are all up and running. Shawn's been working just recently, the last week, with Motorola for some finishing touches on that, and just work through some installation problems. We've got, so part of our realignment, Sergeant Wilmot's working on grant funding for us. He's reinstituted the bulletproof vest grants to help pay for half the vests. They're extremely expensive, but they're around $1,500 a piece. So that covers half of the cost of that. We haven't had that for a while. One of the things we've done is implement like an onboarding presentation with the police department in our facility and what we do there. Counselor White was actually the first one that came through that for us. And we also, last week, our new deputy city manager, Devlin, came up and went through the same thing, and I think they were fairly
It was
pleased
great.
with.
I learned a lot.
So we also, one of the things that Shawn really came up with this one was putting the monthly statistics out on social media. We've gotten a very positive response from that, working with Maura down here with communications at City Hall. So we began participating also in the National Night Out, which is basically community-based, get police out in community. It's a nationwide thing that happens during the year. And we've also put in for a grant for submission of employee wellness. Hopefully this grant will cover a complete screening of each employee from cancer, a physical fitness, and a complete cardiac workup. It's just something for all our employees to help wellness and keep them healthy. I'm sure I left something out, but I think it kind of covers some of the highlights that we've done through our first almost year here. So as you can see, the demands for the police department have grown throughout the years. Our call volume in that 20-year period that I just mentioned in the beginning is over doubled, and that's with only adding 4 more people. So, and we continue, we really expect it's gonna grow. I mean, I know Charlie's really working on new businesses. We got new housing growth. We've got the new courthouse coming. These are all going to increase services for the police department in the future. So part of the FY26 budget, we've asked for funding for an additional officer beginning in January, and hope we'll be able to hire somebody to attend the January 26 academy. Currently, we have a local female who's graduating from college who is in law enforcement and I think a minor in psychology, that's doing an intern with us. It's very interested in that position. So we've kind of got somebody that we could get right in there fairly quickly if approved. So that new officer would graduate in May and wouldn't be able to work until 2026. So as I mentioned earlier, the other two officers that we have graduating and the one that we're gonna put in January, just the time period it takes to somebody that's not a trained police officer, a blue pen as we call it, somebody who's been in the academy, it takes about a year. So that, we have to take that into consideration when we're hiring people to try to keep the department up to speed. And over the course of the next 5 years, we're looking at probably 8 senior experienced officers retiring. So these positions that we're filling with the younger, newer people, we're hoping that they're gonna help keep the department up to speed. They can learn the running of the department and continue to provide the service that I feel that we're providing now for the city of Ellsworth. So in our, in our 26 budget, we had very few increases, and we, other than the person, we had only asked for one other item, and I'll get to that in a minute. But that, and that's covered mostly by a grant. So just a quick overview, kind of like, I guess what Michelle was asking, our increase, for professional service will increase $1,000, was increased $1,000 from last year, and that's really because of just the cost of doing things. Those services include like polygraphs or psychological tests, stuff like that, and the price for those services have gone up. Miscellaneous expense has gone up $1,500, and that's to participate kind of in this national night out that I mentioned earlier. The other increase by $6,000 is our telephone, our cellular coverage for the body cams is what that increase is caused by from the body, the storage and cellular use for the coverage of the body cameras. So the investigation expense has gone up, and this is the grant I was telling you about. So our officers, when they summon somebody that's a criminal offense, or we have like sex offender registrations and that type of thing, they come into the police department, they have to get their fingerprints taken, which we call the old-fashioned way. The officer has to spend the time, roll their fingers in the ink, roll them on a piece of paper, make sure it's not smudged, fill that paperwork out, mail that in. Kind of archaic now. So this expense is for a what's called a digital fingerprint scanner. So the cost of the scanner itself is $25,128, and it's an 80-20 split. So we'd be responsible for about $5,000 of that, a little bit more, and that's digital fingerprint scanner is going to allow us to basically plug right in. It's all digital, all the information's typed in, and it goes directly to SBI, which is a State Bureau of Investigations, where we send those, and that'll help us be more efficient and safer, cleaner. People don't have to touch people to get their fingerprints anymore. We're going to continue on with our lease vehicle program. Our lease expert here can talk on that if you have any questions. We have 2 more scheduled leases to go in place in this budget. And that's, yeah, that covers everything for patrol. If you'd like, I can just finish up here with our dispatch, because we are requesting another dispatch. I can just, and we can answer questions at that point. So our dispatch budget increase for full-time payroll, 1 new dispatcher. So we currently have 2 dispatchers covering from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. This additional position would add coverage from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. As you can see from the budget book that you have there, that we don't have anybody in that time period, and those are our high call volumes are. And it's getting to the point now, if you back up to the fire and their EMS calls, we handle all those. We also handle all the police calls. We handle all the highway, water, sewer department calls. So 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. is a very busy time for us. Our dispatch took in 21,319 phone calls this last year and made 11,231 outgoing calls. And they fielded 10,795 emergency calls between police and fire. So eventually, I mean, if ambulance increases and you increase the ambulance, I mean, there's just no way around us having to have more dispatch. So I try not to be too long, but covered about everything I could.
And I just note on the manager's adjustment here, both for the police and the dispatch, kind of makes back. First of all, thanks to the chief. It was a very rigorous interview process, but all the things we discussed and kind of community engagement and strategic planning, like he and Shawn and the team are delivering on. So, and again, we talked about it before on kind of, that's another big part of the cost increase over the last 5 years, the new station. There's some new costs there, collective bargaining increases, but in a lot of ways we get what we pay for on this one. This is an excellent police department. They're always extremely responsive. Shawn's probably the best at Excel and the budgeting pieces here, if you've read through them already. They're excellent. That being said, I did reduce the patrol officer request. To the chief's point about kind of coming in May, we pulled it back a little bit. To your point, Michelle and John, maybe at the end here, and this is a note for Ashley, as we're looking towards these like new requests is total costs with the FTEs, we'll kind of have that for you all to, where we see where we're at with the mill rate, once the school comes in, once all the requests are in, pulling out some of these like items, so you all can say, all right, this is the true cost of these pieces. But pulled back that request, that's why my manager's adjusting the police budget is a little down from their request level. And then on the dispatch budget, it's the opposite. I kind of talked to the chief, obviously seeing the fire department's increased call volume, knowing that the chief and the deputy chief oftentimes will take shifts in the dispatch area. Felt like, having a, not just doing half, but to your point, Nancy, before too, on, we need this dispatcher. It's pretty critical in that area. And then the last piece, which is not included in this budget, but Steve and I are working on, I think we're pretty close on a new union contract with the police, which is that time of year. So that's obviously not included here, but again, hopefully by the kind of finalization of this cycle, and we'll obviously have an executive session to talk with the council about where we're at there, but that will help inform this budget as well, so we can factor in those costs.
So you requested a half of dispatcher, and you're recommending a full dispatcher?
Yep. And then on the police side of things, I reduced the patrol officer budget a bit just to kind of capture if this person went to the academy and potentially could onboard in May. That's just a couple months of budget for this cycle.
I'm sorry, can you explain that again, Charlie?
So let's say we move forward with this officer, correct me if I'm wrong, but they wouldn't be arriving until May of 2026.
No, we would want to get them hired by January, so they could, we need to give them a hire date before then to get them in the academy for January of '26. They would graduate from the academy May of '26 and go through the FTO program to be on their own end of August, beginning of September of 2026.
In FY '27.
Correct.
Yes,
But we pay them, when we hire them in January, we pay them while they're in the academy.
Correct.
right? So they're in the
Yes.
budget? Okay.
yes. Yeah, that was the half person.
That was the half person.
And we're looking at current payroll roughly $40,000, plus benefits is $8,500, and then whatever health insurance plan they picked.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, this one was, I just said no to that one. I kept you at last year's budgeted level for payroll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, I just
Sorry.
gave
Yeah,
her
so
the-
your
the
recommendation
figures.
is not to hire that?
Not to hire, correct.
The thing I'd like to say about that is there are 8 people gonna retire in the next 5 years of the agency, senior people. If we don't start planning now, it's going to put us in the predicament that we have been in for the last 4 or 5 years with ungodly overtime costs, with vacancies and hardships on the staff trying to fill these. We've had 2 vacancies since May, one in May and one in July. And those people that we've gotten hired are not going to be ready to be used until August or September of this year. And that was from last year. So we're 15 months out trying to get those filled, those positions. If we don't start planning now for the 8 people getting done, there's going to be a problem.
I think the other factor in that too is we want to try to groom people to stay in this department, to be the next captain, the deputy chief, and chief, without going outside the city of Ellsworth. If we have qualified people that are working for us, that we can groom and we can get them, acclimated to the way that we do things, that the way that the city of Ellsworth likes, and hire within, it's a lot better for the city in the long run. So a part of that, hiring these people, younger people, keeping up the staff, we can train them, we can show them. One thing that Dave and Shawn have been working on the last 3 months, amongst everything else we've been working on with the budget and the contract negotiation, is that we're coming up for our accreditation. And Shawn can speak to that as far as how many are accredited, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of pride that we have that accreditation, and we want to be able to hand that down. It takes a lot of learning to learn how to do that, and just to have, like Shawn said, the top 5 to 6 guys gone in the next possible 6 to 8 years. It takes time to get people up to speed on that. So.
And to that, we went to that county meeting, it sounds like there are a lot of people competing, or a lot of police stations competing for the very limited number of people that are even interested in the job, so I feel that. I have a few questions on some of your items here. I wanted to know what the difference between payroll OT fitness and then payroll OT fitness stipend is.
So, yeah, the OT fitness pays them 4 hours if they take it when they're off duty. And then the stipend is, depending on the percentile they pass the PT test at, there's a set dollar figure as a reward. It goes from 200 to 1,000, 20 percentile to 60 percentile, I believe, are the percentiles. So depending on what they do, they're rewarded for that.
It's really good incentive
Once a
to
year.
stay in shape. That's awesome. And
If we
then.
feed them a lot of pizza, they won't be as good shape.
Which,
We can keep the budget down.
and also that is, Tabitha, that is a contractual issue as well.
That's
That's in our
Oh,
contract, so we
the-
have to have that. It's a contractual issue.
got you. Building maintenance, given that it looked pretty good in there, what is the plan for the building maintenance this year at that
So-
number?
That covers our janitor. He's there 3 days a week, 4 hours a day. He not only cleans, but he fixes floors, holes in the wall. He washes the outside of the building. He shovels, he sweeps, he sands, he mows, weed whacks. He's kind of like a mini gym. Jim still comes up if there's something big wrong, but other than that, he handles that.
Okay.
So that covers him. That also covers the elevator inspection. It covers, we have a contract with Cintas. They come in weekly to change out rugs, provide us our paper towels, soap, all those type of things. And then there's a few $1,000s set aside in there for accidental type issues that might arise with those things.
Tabitha, just to chime in a bit, it's kind of zooming ahead to facilities budget, but there is, when I mentioned the janitorial request is the only other really FTE side of things, is we do, currently we have about 3 times or 4 times as many hours spent on cleaning the police station than we do the entirety of City Hall. This is obviously an extremely used public facility. So when you add those 2 budgets together for facilities cleaning, if we were to clean this building into the, to a similar type hours, or obviously more, we have a lot more community here, you're gonna cover a full-time employee being here. So just, we've done kind of the hours, and we'll get there later on, but that's part of the reason. I was originally not gonna even approve that. We'll stick with what we're at, but when I saw what we're cleaning at the police station now granted, he does a few other things as well, but then how much we're spending on a pretty high rate as well for a very minimal amount of cleaning services in City Hall. We combine those 2 budgets together, we're pretty close even with benefits, and we're like doubling the amount of cleaning hours at City Hall and at the police station. So that'll be in the facilities budget for the council to decide to move forward with, or to keep where we're at with the police station and others, but we'll go more in detail there.
So I'd just like to add on that cleaning part. In order to come into our facility and clean, you have to pass a pretty extensive background. And our current person that we have there has passed that. And that was one of the issues, I think, once the city did away with having a janitor, they couldn't find a cleaning place that could get anybody in there that could pass the background to be able to come in and clean the police department. So,
And then one last question I have is, how do you guys bring in revenue? And what are there other creative ways to increase revenue?
Bake sale.
Especially if we
only-
do, if you are fully staffed.
no.
What was the back part?
If you, what is your revenue? Is there a way to increase police revenues? And would that be dependent on if you were fully staffed as well?
Yeah, so the only revenues we bring in are, I think it's gonna be like $40,000 you'll see for the revenue line. Police reports, people have to pay for those, accident reports. We do bring in some revenues from the court system when officers have to testify certain times. The other revenue we bring in, but we pay it out, is if private citizens need to hire us for certain things, they're charged a certain amount, so we do bring some revenue into that, but we're really paying that back out. We're not a revenue making business unless you get into parking meters.
Don't mention kiosks. How dare we try to collect
Well, I can't believe I did
$500,000?
that.
But we're not a revenue department.
It's a conversation, that, we don't even ticket people for, they could generate a little revenue from that, but it doesn't, as Tammy has mentioned, that we could hire people, have them work with the PD, but that won't pay for itself unless you add in the kiosks. Even that type of revenue generating activity will actually cost more to ticket than it would bring in. There are some revenue generating ideas for the cities, but there's not ones that people seem to be very pumped about. Not the ones that make fair amounts of money anyways.
No,
have
like
$1,000 down there, they don't pay you very much to go to court.
Yeah, $1,000 or $2,000 a year. Depends how much we testify.
It's budgeted at
Better than jury
1,000.
duty.
Yeah.
It's only budgeted at 1,000, I just was wondering, they must not pay you very much per
No, they
time.
don't. It's not even anywhere near the salary. Yes.
I assumed.
We'll get them someday, Shawn.
Is it a consideration that payroll overtime could decrease with a new staff, or would the new staff member just be covering for vacant?
So you're talking the general payroll overtime one of $147,000?
Especially after
That's
fire
not-
presentation.
That is not gonna really decrease. That line item covers, they currently work a 36, 48-hour week in 14 days, and they're paid every other week 4 hours overtime because of the schedule. So that $147,000 covers the 4 hours of overtime they get, which is somewhere for the entire agency that's involved in that scheduling, around $90,000. And then the other part covers when the highway needs us to follow the Vortex back truck around, we have to pay somebody for that, things like that. That's where all that other 40 grand comes into play. Snowstorm emergencies, windstorm emergencies, things like that. Barricaded people when we're calling them in. Yellow flag laws that take hours sometimes to confiscate the guns, go do all the court paperwork, so those type of things, that's what that covers, John. You will see this year, though, it's gonna probably be over $100,000 to $126,000 because of the 2 vacancies we've had.
Well, in the fiscal analysis I did, you have to add all the overtime lines. So for the police department, FY '26, at the request level, we're at $357,950 in total overtime. Then FY '26 for the fire department is $432,621. That's not the new one, that was the original department request level. So you're looking at close to $800,000 in overtime between the police and fire. And this is a question that I've been reading, research on it, and, the fire department has added more people, but it's not decreasing the overtime. Like the police, it doesn't necessarily track like that. So how do you get those costs down? But the kind of, now that we've done a lot of the union contracting, you see how these overtimes, like the cycles that they're in, it's kind of baked into the wage structure in a lot of ways. And it's a difficult thorny problem. Like, you see $800,000 in overtime between police and fire. It's like, wow, should we hire 2 or 3 more in each to get it down? But you might actually still have your overtime costs up. I don't know.
It sounded from the fire presentation like the amount of overtime was getting, not necessarily, like, beyond that baked-in amount of, like, now it's sort of dangerous and people aren't getting enough rest and mistakes could get made, but it doesn't sound quite like that for the police.
Yeah, I mean, we're bare staff. There's 3 people responding to complaints during the day from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. There's 4, supposed to be 4 from 2 p.m. to 7, but we've been running short this whole time. We've been vacant, trying to save some money in the budget. We are not the completely proactive agency that we once were. We're reactive because of the staffing and the amount of call volume that we're dealing with.
And the other factor in that is just the burnout factor. I mean, there's only so many people to go around for that overtime. So after a while, just, we're forcing people to work that don't want to work, and that's somebody coming in, putting their time in, not actually going out and being proactive like you mentioned. So there's a lot of different things that go into it. Being 2 people short isn't just an overtime producer. It kind of trickles down into morale, burnout, that type of thing.
Yeah, and there's
Those 8 or so people that you mentioned are gonna retire in the next 5 to 6 to 8 years or so. Is that like a retirement age pension thing that you know a set date or year that they will?
2 of us are here, so.
Really?
Wow. So we can actually look at the schedule and say.
We have a rough idea, yeah, when people are gonna be leaving. It doesn't mean they have to, but we
Could,
know.
probably, yeah.
Probably could, and we know ages of people, so, people aren't gonna probably be working into their 60s, chances are, so. Yep.
I did note with the teams, there's kind of a generational difference too with the overtime. Like, you'll see it in last year's, in the breakdowns. There was one officer who made over $180,000 last year. And that person put in a ton of hours. There seems to be, younger generation is not, the more senior generation is kind of picking up a lot of the overtime in those pieces. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next few years on, how we can continue to staff when those older folks that were picking up more of that overtime are there, and the younger folks that may not want to work that extensive hours for overtime. Or maybe not, maybe they get older and they want a little more money in their pocket to save for retirement, so.
Pay for the kids.
This generation.
There you go.
I just wonder if it, sort of like we do the capital improvement plan, if it might be worth looking at a 6-year, 8-year plan of one person comes in, another person comes in, one person goes out, another person, kind of staggering like that.
That is kind of how
Sounds
we
like
have been doing it, or trying to anyway. The other thing we run into is it's just, you can't, if you said you can hire 2 people, it might take us 6 months to 8 months to find 2 people. It's not an instant where we'd walk out of here and find 2 people to come in and go to work. It's a long process.
We're in a unique situation where we've been working with a person and potentially have somebody that we could get right in there, so, and well-educated, and somebody from the area that I don't foresee moving away, so, yeah.
And the thing is with the positions too, if we know we got it, we are more, it's so competitive, if you can't tell somebody, yes, we'll hire you. Well, maybe, we're gonna wait 2 months. Well, they don't wanna wait 2 months when they got 5 other job offers down the road, so.
Any other questions? So we'll, to your point, Michelle, we'll kind of pull that officer out, what the benefits and costs would be, so we can kind of consider that.
And the
for-
dispatcher too.
And the dispatcher, so at the end of the cycle here, we can look at any of the new FTE requests, once we have the mill rate and kind of see where we're at. And happy to do that.
You guys gonna do anything to celebrate the 75th anniversary?
It's not in the budget.
You probably can't have it.
It's in May, so, it's coming right up, but, I don't
You
know.
really can't have another
We really
open house or
haven't-
anything like that, can you, now that you're
No.
operating out of there?
No.
That was fun. That was incredibly interesting. too.
Yeah, I mean, we can probably sit down and talk about it and come up with something. I mean, that's one of the things we talked about, just to get it recognized, was to get everybody the badges, and unfortunately, I didn't put my new one on, but everybody got
Shawn
them,
doesn't wear
so
one.
they're kind of nice.
Lost his badge.
Oh, there it is,
Took my
alright.
coat, I don't have my vest on.
That'd be fun, though, to do that. I mean, that's quite a thing.
Yeah.
75 years.
A lot of people coming and going.
Yeah.
I don't know, does anybody else see a dunk tank with police officers?
I'll be next to the,
I know who Dave's gonna put in that dunk tank.
Thank you.
it'll be next to Tay's your favorite.
Oh, yeah, Tay's your favorite officer.
No, city council.
Just want to clear, I did not say that.
And we will go next to code. Mr. Grant.
Careful, one of those
Still
is
awake.
gluten-free. That's the gluten-free one.
It's really good.
You gonna risk it? Yeah.
And for the record, I do want to work into my 60s.
I'm already doing it, I highly recommend it.
Me too.
What page are we?
Oh, let's see.
Code is on 87. They added it. The new,
Yeah, we got
Hey,
it.
Thank you for the
I
agenda
will
with
share.
page numbers.
Yeah.
That's nice. Game changer.
I like your budget.
no worries.
Is your doctor on? Is your doctor? I know that, but she's living on my couch with me.
Oh, yeah, that was, but Teddy got sick after that. So.
Or is that just supposed to be like?
You better start, or we'll just. keep
Yeah,
starting.
just go ahead and start.
Okay. I've never done one of these before, so this is my first solo try at this.
It's a negative. It's a positive number.
There's not a whole lot that's changed from last year. I think, I don't have any new requests, it's all, yeah. The only thing I really think that's gonna change, much, I think Charlie has for the new car, is that on there, Charlie?
Yep, so we budgeted 4,000 to close out the year for the new EV, which we discussed at a previous finance committee meeting. So I think we got like $20,000 off the vehicle. So still waiting to see when we'll align on the chargers, which we also approved last year, but we also have the Franklin Street parklet chargers, so that we may just have to designate one of those.
I can give you an update, they just pulled their permits today, so.
Pulled their permits?
For the Ellsworth, for the City Hall EV chargers.
Cool.
I did approve that yesterday, so. Did they respond to my email about the spring? They said yes?
He's gonna get back to you on that. I think it's late, he said late spring.
All right, late spring is better
But
than
it's,
fall, so.
it's in Versant's
It's
hands.
June,
That's where I left it, so
Okay.
it's Versant.
Good. Well, then hopefully that car arrives and charges out there. You know, that in the near term, we can talk more about that, now that we're getting to the permit stage later, but.
What's the violators enforcement fund that you requested?
That was added last year. It was an agreement that Lori made with the previous city manager. And I can't tell you exactly how it was budgeted for last year, but I think this year we did it, it was an encumbrance.
Yeah, so we're treating it as an encumbrance for next year. So there was 20,000 there. They were gonna kind of take the solar, I think some of the
Yeah,
solar.
it was some of our solar.
And they were gonna put it there as its own revenue just for, but to me, like city revenues are city revenues. You know, they budgeted and there's, for a violator enforcement fund and, you know, we'll put aside 20,000 and encumber it over this year and kind of see how it goes for them
I
pulling out.
guess I still don't know what it is.
It was,
Because it's an expense, not a revenue.
I'm not sure why it was, I think it's,
I can speak.
Okay.
The expense part is for when they take violators to court and those court fees come in, then that expense part is going to pay for it. So that's the expense part of that. And then it's the miscellaneous fines, where I think and Nate can text me if I'm wrong, but the miscellaneous fines is where that, because the department request has that 64,000 in it, that was from the solar permits that they sold for a solar field that came into Ellsworth. That was the money that came in, and when Glenn was city manager, Lori met with Glenn and said, you know, we would like this money to stay within the code enforcement office so they can take violators to court, and that would pay for them to have more leverage on taking violators to court because they didn't have any funds to do so. So that was gonna pay for that.
Oh, okay, so you got $20,000 in expense to take him to court, and then, but you got 64,000.
Yeah, so that 64 that you see in the revenue for the miscellaneous fines was from that. And then the violator enforcement fund, the department requested 20,000, but we're gonna use the 64,000 up top in the revenue to pay for the violator enforcement fund. And it's essentially the same thing, where they're gonna use that revenue stream to pay for violators to go to court. So that's the expense account, but the revenue account is if they have any more solar fields come in, that's where those permits will go.
Trying to
Those-
think about this,
It's
if
like a
maybe
mini
we're budgeting it the right
enterprise.
way. Maybe
Yeah,
we need
I'm not sure
to,
that's quite the
how do we
correct
encumber
way of
this
doing
over,
that.
but then have it be a revenue expense and kind of draw it down? Because we're not nearly there each year.
It should be a jail account, like on, like not liability, but
It's like a mini enterprise. Anybody?
yeah.
Maybe just so we don't get too down the line in problem solving, we put the
Yeah,
note
we
on
can
this.
put a
I'll
note.
follow up
Put
with
a
Shawn
note
and
on it,
Tammy.
yeah, because yeah.
Yeah, and we'll figure out how to treat this, because there's money there. We want to just encumber it to kind of treat these types of things and draw it down. But let me brainstorm a bit. I'll talk to Tammy and Michelle about, because they're some of the experts on this piece.
Kind of a weird way to encumber revenue.
Not to be another voice, but it's definitely just not being properly accounted for. I think Tammy just said it
Hey, Nate.
shouldn't be a revenue expense, but.
It's
It's
God.
like the voice of God. I didn't even know you were on.
Don't look behind the curtain, don't look behind the curtain.
Yeah, that's kind of a weird way of doing it, but.
Yeah, we were trying to clear the decks. I'm like, what? Like, this isn't really a revenue for code. It's hanging out there, but we're not using
It's an
it.
asset, not revenue.
So we're
Because
like-
isn't that, like, when we take people to court, that's really your court fees and your attorney fees. It doesn't,
And maybe that's the way we do this. We just kind of clear the decks on this. We bring it in the general revenues, and we can increase the legal budget for potential violator enforcement. And that's new to this year, Michelle. We talked about that last time. Is we put new legal line items based on like looking at legal bills over the last couple of years into each department on who was generating the most legal, and now we'll code them to departments. This first year is going to be a little bit, this is our best guess, but going forward, we're going to be able to kind of like a lot of things, just track legal within the cost center that it's occurring, so that we can better say, wow, we're getting a lot of code, we better budget more for that next year, or we're not getting a lot of, because it's right now, it just all kind of comes to this one legal. But then we also had a council conversation on, we also need to bring that back together, kind of like a pie chart that consolidates legal too, so we can see it as a whole as well, so.
make sure you're not spending too much on it too.
Yep.
So that's why the 13% increase looks the way it does, when in reality, there's not really any.
And sorry, Michelle, too, we also did that for printing and advertising, so you'll see a lot of like, what's this new printing and advertising? Departments that are having a lot of, council-generated things that need to go on agendas and public hearings and
Did you
like.
put that under council?
We did actually.
Yeah, we have a line for you guys as well. And also insurance is broken out per department instead of one, yeah.
So it's just kind of, again, it is kind of skewing previous budgets, but we do better now. We'll be able to kind of track cost centers more effectively, I think, in the future.
Makes sense.
Charlie, I have a question for you for this and going to the next departments. At a council meeting a month or two ago, we talked about an updated schedule of fees. Is that factored in here, or is that the current fee schedule?
We have factored that in here, but we're gonna have to have a separate conversation in May to get the council. We had a finance committee presentation on this by Robert.
Right.
I know, Steve, you weren't there. There seemed to be general support for the idea of updating fees.
Every couple of decades it ought to happen.
Yep.
Every couple.
That's a good policy.
Robert's done a big analysis of, to not make us, really not, to still be the lowest in this entire region and area. on all these areas, but at least to update it and then maybe a process moving forward so it tracks inflation, so we don't have to kind of keep having these sit around. I know Steve wasn't at that meeting and he very much disagrees with that, so we'll have a much more robust conversation, probably at the May council meeting, I think, or.
Yeah, I can speak a little more. It's, the majority of code's fees are part of Chapter 56, and that requires us to get planning board approval to mess with Chapter 56 at all before I can bring it to the council. And I missed the window to get on this planning board, so I have to wait till May. So I'll be zooming in from Sugarloaf to that council meeting. I have the annual code conference, so. But yeah, I'll be presenting that in May to get that done, so it's ready to go July 1st when the budget kicks in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we could, I wanted to see what it was gonna be like here, as if, but we could pull back that budget on the revenues just to not reflect those increased revenues. What's the total that we were thinking that it would increase revenues by here, do you remember?
I tried to bring it in line so it would get rid of, last year we showed about a $40,000 deficit. I tried to get my initial increase to
be budget
just about
positive.
wipe that out, yeah.
Yeah, so about, it's only a delta of about 40,000, so. Any other questions for code? Lucky dog.
So you come in with no new requests, and,
Yeah.
okay.
I do have one question. Do you guys currently share one vehicle?
We
Is
do,
that- okay.
currently. And the plan is to keep Cody, we call our car Cody.
Yeah.
The plan is to keep Cody, it's a 140,000 mile old police cruiser. And the new EV that Charlie got us.
That'll be helpful.
Yeah, we're adding, there has been, again, general council support. One of the reasons that we added, even though code used to have 3, but we brought code back to 3 last year, was to train up somebody, and Amber's been doing awesome. She's trained, she's now certified as a code enforcement officer.
She has about half of the total that she would need to be a full code officer, but she has, I think she's missing 1 to do like a home occupation, or occupancy exam.
So what would be required by a short-term?
Yeah, short-term rental, that's where we're going with it, yeah.
So the idea is we have this, now we can have 2, there's gonna be a ton of activity generated by that. And we'll probably be killing that other car at some point, but, when she dies, because that's an old police car too, so while that's 150,000.
I believe it was Troy's old police car.
So it's got the hours on that engine because it idles so much is, wild. So
It
we're
could
not-
go any day.
We're more investing in that. We have the EV to replace, and if, we'll maybe consider additional vehicles if there's that much generated. But you kind of have a busy season for the summer and then not as much activity. So hopefully that old car gets us through the summer.
Assuming you all have us move forward with at least a registration part for short-term rental, you kind of have to do a safety inspection of the home, and there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 short-term rentals in Ellsworth. So whether it's me or Bobby or Amber, whichever else is going to those inspections, that's another additional 500 inspections we're gonna have to do in the next year. Even if we stagger them after, do a couple of years, that's still a lot of extra inspections, so the car's gonna kind of be necessary.
There'd be a fee associated with those.
Yes, and I'm working on that one too, figuring out exactly what the fee's gonna be. Figuring, our time, the travel time, the paperwork time, all that stuff. But yeah, there's gonna be an additional 250 to 500 inspections next year. So I think a car is gonna be necessary just to do that.
If you guys have to be out at different times, do you just get mileage and use your own?
Yeah, that's what, Bobby and I have managed to not really have to do that much, but I know when she and Lori would split, Lori would put mileage in if she even bothered, but I would insist that whoever, if it was me or whoever, would put mileage in, because it's just fair. But, yeah, that's. Oh, and then to give you an idea, like in the summer when we'll be doing most of our inspections, probably, hopefully not, maybe. I had Bobby pull a couple of average days out of our like average days in the summer, and I was driving over 100 miles a day. Yeah, just to do inspections. And so if we're adding another several hundred a year.
It's not hard to do in Ellsworth, though.
No, I mean, it's weird. It's a big town, yeah.
The air conditioner still work in that car?
Thankfully. The heat, too. Not much else.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
no
very
problem.
much.
All right. Next, we have Sara, Deputy City Manager, stepping in for planning here.
Good night.
Good evening, everyone. Sara Devlin, Deputy City Manager. Since I came on board about a month ago, our planner has departed, so with my background in planning, it was kind of natural for me to help take on some of the responsibilities in that department. So I put together my very first municipal budget for one department, and here we go. So payroll is staying the same. We are planning to hire a planner. The job has been posted, so hopefully that will get filled soon. Professional services has increased. That includes 2 items. It includes a match for a DEP grant to do a study on Card Brook, the urban impaired stream, to look at ways to restore Card Brook. The other request in that line item that went up is from the city manager, which is to add $45,000 to hire a consultant to look at doing a rewrite to our ordinances based on our newly updated comprehensive plan, our housing study, and our business attraction plan. So that's just to look at all of the recommendations of those 3 studies and other things as well as they come up through this budgeting process or other priorities in the city, to look at what ordinances need to be rewritten to help us achieve the goals in those documents. Next is legal, and as we said, that's a new line for all departments. Tuition and reimbursement, that is really to increase our GIS training within the city. We currently have 2 GIS licenses, and this line is to have the assistant planner get trained in GIS so we can be more robust with using that software. And I think that is all for the increases for the budget, so they gave me a pretty easy one.
Yeah, and the manager adjustment was the addition of the consultant for review of the city ordinances per the business attraction plan, which I think is from 2023, the housing needs assessment, the comp plan, and I have a list of notes when I hear developers, either in planning board or others with issues with our ordinances, whether it's the size of our parking lots, whether it's the heights of buildings, a variety of things that's limiting potential growth. And to me, that's the North Star and the lifeblood of broadening tax base. We saw police, fire, increasing city services. How are we going to deal with that? Well, we're really fortunate in rural America that we actually are seeing a pretty unprecedented amount of growth through our planning board and through others, but we have older ordinances that are in very much need of an update that could inspire more growth. And we have an ordinance on the books right now, where the line of sight that's kind of vague and was appealed and potentially put into jeopardy a $14+ million middle income housing project, which if that ordinance wasn't that way. Now I think there's other reasons why that was not, that could still go forward, but there's, to me, it's one of the business, there's one thing that I really want to do to get business attraction going. I know Steve and I have talked about we're certified business friendly, but he and I, and many of you may, that people feel like we're not business friendly here. And really changing our ordinances and showing that we're responding to make it as streamlined and smooth as possible is kind of priority 1 for me over the next 8 months or so.
So when you say ordinances, you're really meaning the zoning and development, right?
Yep.
Those 2 ordinances?
Correct. And there's also a separate piece, and we're going to get into TIF a little later on. There may be surplus TIF funding in this budget cycle. There was increased revenue that was generated from our economic TIF district, which this would be very much in line to fund that in the near term. So, as I said at a previous council meeting, that one thing I like about action product level consultants for stuff like this is put a timeline on it. There's very busy staff that are engaged in a zillion other things. We just heard about Robert with, I was trying to get it here, but it wasn't quite ready. Well, you put it a consultant, you put a date on it, have them do it, you have them do the interviews, they don't have to get bothered by, the zillion tasks that we get in, and we actually put on the books. I know I've talked to our planning board chair as well. He's just said, they keep telling me about ordinance change around here, I never don't see it happen. So I want to see it happen. Something actually when I first came here, I heard it from a lot of developers. There's been times where I'm just like, maybe I'll just work weekends to like put this parking lot, change what it would need. But I'm not exactly, my time and my expertise is not in that area too. So that's importance for me.
Sarah, is the DEP match the 7,000 that's
Yes.
in here? And then the additional 45 gets it up to the 53?
Yes, correct.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
And what are we doing? The DEP's doing a study for the Cardbrook watershed? What are they?
So it's an urban impaired stream, so it will be a study to look at what we can do to restore it in the urbanized area. And then we also have funding through another I forget what it's exactly
Enviro
called.
grant.
Enviro grant, which was, I believe, from like an oil spill in the municipality, that is for implementation funding. So once that study's done, then we have funding set aside to implement the recommendations.
And is that for issues next to where the courthouse is going?
I think it's further down. I don't think we've
Downstream?
identified the
Okay.
exact parameters, but I believe it's more like by the Pizza Hut, like more like really in the
Okay.
like urban core. I think up by where the courthouse is going, I think it's been identified that that's pretty good, but down
Okay.
more towards
Of
like
course, where
High
the
Street.
development has been is a problem, okay. Thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah, and there is a Cardbrook cleanup coming up.
Yeah, the 26th of April, the Cardbrook cleanup day.
Can you send it by road or?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Oh, Ashley's got it in her notes. Better you than me last year, Ashley, with my like master Excel sheet. Those were fun days. Any other questions for?
That new hopeful full-time will come on fairly soon, or?
Well, we just posted the job on Friday, I believe, and we've already had 6 or 7 applicants, so we're gonna wait a little bit to have some more roll in, and then we'll start interviewing for that position. So I would say by the 1st of May, hopefully, we'll have at least a candidate selected, and then go from there.
So probably not a huge.
Yeah, we went pretty quick in reviewing the current job description and posting, and wanted to get that out the door pretty quick.
So probably not a lot of time after budget season starts that we wouldn't like want to prorate some of this. We expect them to.
Depending on the
start
candidates.
in-
Yeah, it's a big one, and so yeah, the candidate pool. There's good match, absolutely. But also I would just Brittany, Merrill, our assistant planner, couldn't speak more highly of her. Not just here, but she's been doing some of the adaptive leadership stuff with us, and she had like the best constructive criticism of anybody that I've had here. I was like, wow, you are an old soul. So very happy with her work, and also with Sarah's great planning background. Not that we want to be wearing multiple hats for a long period of time, but that one, it's a gritty position, and so hopefully it's a good batch. But I haven't reviewed the resumes yet. Cool.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. IT.
Here it comes.
No.
That was good.
Tammy kind of did
To the
that.
second.
Oh,
As soon as you open the door.
perfect.
That was good, Tam.
All right. So before I get into the budget real quick, I wanted to give a brief synopsis of what we do as an IT department. I know we have some newer counselors, and for the general public, may not know what we do. The IT department has 2 employees, myself and Nate Burkhardt. We support all city departments on a 24/7 basis, minus the school department, although we do collaborate with them. We don't directly assist them with support. We support all employees and their computers, cloud and on-premise servers, disaster recovery and backups, phones, smartphones, mobile computers, and police and fire vehicles, copper and fiber optic cabling, wireless networks, cybersecurity firewalls, traffic signals, meeting broadcasts, access controls, and security cameras. We have connected equipment located throughout the city in over 30 locations. Some quick numbers. We have 120 employee computers, 135 active user accounts, 55 Windows and Linux servers, 50 printers and/or copiers, 95 network switches, 14 wireless bridges, which are sites that are connected primarily by wireless link, 82 wireless access points, and 60-plus unique software applications. So, there's a lot going on. Looking into the IT budget, I'm not going to go line by line. If you have questions when we get there, you can ask. But I did want to highlight two accounts in particular. The first one being my service contracts account. The service contracts account is used for paying software subscriptions and maintenance. We currently have around 60 maintenance and/or subscriptions agreements on various software applications. And those aren't just for the IT department, they are all city departments. So for example, the Microsoft 365 subscription comes out of there, vision appraisal software for assessing, internet connection fees, Cassell Trio, ArcGIS, police and fire records management, etc. That account is actually down very slightly this year, just kind of the way things worked out. Some subscriptions or agreements are biannual, so you do them every other year. So it's kind of a good year, it's down a little bit. And we're also not budgeting for Munis this year, so that's a big help. The other account I'd like to point out is the data processing enhancements. That account is used mainly for hardware purchases for the various city departments. Part of that is set aside for unexpected uses, for equipment failures, unanticipated purchases, things like that. But we also have some of that earmarked for specific purposes. And in this year's budget, those are $25,000 for desktop computer replacements. We're still catching up on our desktops. We have several still that will not run Windows 11. And we have to be to Windows 11 by October because support for Windows 10 ends in October. I have $15,000 for a new phone system. We're using a Panasonic system currently. Panasonic is getting out of the phone business and will soon be unsupported. It's already becoming hard to get parts. We've had to go to eBay. We bought some refurbished parts for the system. So we need to move to a new system. And when the PD moved to their new building, we actually put a new system there that could be expanded to cover the rest of the city. So these funds will be used to finish that expansion to the rest of the city buildings. I have $10,000 for City Hall access control upgrade, which would move the City Hall access controls, which is the door fob, to the same system we put in at the PD. That system is much more modern. It's not locked into a specific vendor. You don't have to be a dealer to buy the equipment. It's open for anyone to purchase. We can install it ourselves. We can have our cabling vendor do the installations. It's cloud-based. You can have an app on your phone. You can open the doors with the NFC chip in your phone. Much more modern than what we have now. It can integrate with the elevator. So it's just, really brings us up to speed with access controls in this building. The other big benefit would be we can issue one key to all employees and assign permissions to that key. So a police officer wouldn't need to carry a master key for each building. They could have one key and be assigned master to the PD, to City Hall, to whatever other buildings we install that in. So I also had requested $15,000 for a new large format plotter printer, but the manager chose to cut that. I do think there's a need for it. We've had several employees come to us wanting that back. We had a plotter for years. It died, and we haven't replaced it. I think it's been about 2 years since that died.
Can you go elsewhere?
They've
been
using, I don't know if is it Andrew McCullough?
I used the school a
Well,
couple
the school has
times.
one too.
They have one, so I kind of went over there and begged for them to print out some things in a larger area.
It's not as convenient as having one here, obviously, so we have workarounds.
Could you use that terminology again?
It's a plotter print, it's just a big printer for printing like maps
big
and things like that.
yeah.
It also has a scanner so they can
I didn't know
scan
what it was
in.
called. that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So, it's something we've had for years and years until about 2 years ago, and then we didn't replace it when it died.
What would be, what did you use it for when you did have it?
So it was used a lot by planning, so it lived on the second floor, it was used a lot by those departments, code and planning. Developers would submit plans, other types of files, that they could then print out themselves on bigger paper. We would print out presentations for the council. It was used quite a lot for those type of things. And for digitizing records, it had a scanner in it as well, so you could scan in the large documents that they have stored away and get them, on the network. So,
Charlie would often have like big courthouse schematics on his desk, like huge. That was pretty helpful with that.
Yeah, so it is a bit of a hindrance in trying to get to the school, but we also have the big screen TVs. So I've been using that. I originally cut everything in data processing aids when I had all the red pens out. And then Jason and I had some conversations, and turns out we're probably gonna need phones in this place, and those other ones are they're almost they're done. We can't make risk not having phones.
this is my third year requesting the phone, so I'm hoping that we can get, we're, like I say, going to eBay and buying refurbished parts isn't gonna last forever, so.
Yeah, so I was, for this budget cycle, and then I don't know if you planned this, but then we had the all-staff meeting a couple days ago, and the door system stopped working, and I've seen this a couple times where the school is trying to get here at night, and then they're calling Jason, and it's like, all right, well, I guess we should probably have access to our building too. So I brought those back in because I do feel like they're needed. But the plotter, I think, another year, it is an important use. I think it's helpful. I don't know. I try to think of, could we put that into capital? It does kind of last 10 years, but I know Steve's that doesn't like to have things that aren't going to have a huge lifespan. And is it?
You'd be lucky to make 10 years. I don't think capital's the right place for it personally, but.
It's not expensive enough.
Yeah. So.
There's a $5,000 increase in training?
Yeah, Charlie did that.
Yeah, I think we talked about increasing the IT training. There's all this AI technology, other pieces, especially with the department moving forward, going to the cloud in many ways, which could have some other implications. I really feel like this, and especially with Jason and Nate's skill set, these are top quality employees. That there's some areas that I feel like if they had a little more training budget to go out to, it's in one of your SMART goals.
Yeah. Yes.
Felt like they were kind of under budgeting compared to a lot of other folks with their training, and their skill set's pretty technical, and we're increasing ChatGPT trainings with folks, and Microsoft Office trainings and all these other pieces, so giving them some opportunities to kind of train up and then train the trainers. It's a really big goal to kind of take their big brains and great skill sets. I mean, Nate is also on this budget process, he's not here for these meetings for a lot, but his imprint is all over this budget and his expertise and his Excel skills, so really wanted him.
Nate's like the software guy, I'm like the hardware guy, we kind of we complement each other quite well. And we're happy to spend any training money we can get, we're happy to have it. I mean, there's a lot we can do with that, so.
And technology is always changing, so it's good to
Especially
stay on.
lately.
It's good to stay on top.
And last year I kind of slashed training budgets across the board by 20% because I was coming in, rebuilt the entire budget process, and it felt like I needed to do something, and that was just kind of, this year I feel a little bit more refined with my red lining and these other things in some areas. It's all right, we can bring this budget back up for training a bit. Other manager, was the plotter. Plotter went down. They all went down for a brief period of time, but then a couple came back in.
I'm quite persuasive.
I also should note, and it's mentioned in my cost center analysis, this was another outlier that I was, wow, this is a big increase in costs over the last 4 or 5 years, and I looked at a lot of other cities and towns and seen, but the more I dug into it, it's more relative to like how we're tracking costs within this cost center. So they accumulate a lot of, all of everybody's Microsoft Office 365. We just talked today about potentially adding a little more revenue from water, wastewater, which they provide contracts for and services for, and they're gonna make an analysis of what that should be, so it should be an enterprise account. We're doing a similar thing with finance, where it's supposed to be budgeted, it was in the budget, but it was never coming forward from water, wastewater for their financial services, so kind of truing up that a bit as well, which will, at the final budget, we'll probably add in a little revenue there.
Jason, when we hire more people, does that increase your budget too?
Yes.
Because everybody needs to have.
Every computer, license from, now that we're in the cloud for Microsoft 365, there's that license. Trying to think of all the things, but yes.
And I really like this, even though it kind of shows a higher IT and technology, but I really like how this tracks things. We kind of did it the opposite in Massachusetts. They switched to a centralized Executive Office of Technology and Security Services, and they had zero budget, but the way it funded itself was to do a shared services expense on every secretariat, and it was just this, they all promised it was gonna be cheaper, we're gonna centralize services and buy things in bulk, and all the secretariats stopped budgeting for their IT, and they just got this monstrous shared services IT bill that increased all of our IT budgets by 3,000%. So this, it feels like, you could budget it the opposite way, where IT budget is essentially zero, and everybody else has a shared service for IT. But even though it seems more expensive, they're increasing, it's really kind of showing true cost in that. So if we have to go to the cloud, if we have to do this, we see how much it's costing.
And it's helpful to have the expert explaining the costs as well, rather than having it broken out.
When I first started, way back when, it wasn't that way. A lot of it was divvied up to the departments, but we found at the time there were certain things that were getting paid, the invoices that we didn't actually have anymore, because people just didn't understand. So it made more sense to bring these under one location than I would know. We were paying for cell phones that didn't exist for, who knows how long, and I didn't even know we were getting a bill for it, so. That goes way, way back, but, that's kind of why I did it up that way. The other departments love it, but, it hits my department kind of hard sometimes.
We don't do departmental scores, but I think IT would score very high. I could definitely see this department needing another person in the next few years.
We, putting some of the numbers together today for this presentation, we had done a similar document back in 2015, and a lot of these numbers, as far as device counts and things, have actually doubled in 10 years. It's been pretty crazy, so.
And you think about all these other employees, all these other things, all these new IT services, all this technology, all this, and it's 2 guys. And they're all the service tickets they're doing, so they're doing the streetlights, they're doing this, and it feels like there could be a huge, to your point, Michelle, on what's the value you're getting from it. We want obviously next year express that if we feel like I have a backlog of IT expansion type, that could potentially offer cost savings or customer service increases that, but not this year. This year we're not doing a lot of FTE requests.
So they're always out and about. I think I saw you guys hanging the new security cameras in Harbor Park on a scissor lift.
Rented lift, yeah. Mm-hmm. We do all our own tricks, so, yeah.
Incredible.
We outsource as little as we can, so, we recognize that, we're fortunate to have what we have, and we try to keep the cost down where we can, and not outsource things to vendors. Unless it's a bigger project, I will, but, it's hard to sometimes take a day or two to dedicate to something like that, but, do what we can in-house.
In the new police department, when they opened it up for that open house,
Yeah.
went down, I was on the bottom floor, I don't know
Yeah,
what
the
they call
training
it.
room, yeah.
And Jason was in this room with, I'm not kidding you, it was almost buried in wires.
Yeah.
Trying, just putting them all through, labeling them all, and I'm just like, how do you do that? It was incredible.
One wire at a time.
I just walked in and started laughing at him, I was just like, oh my gosh. Streetlights?
Street lighting? Okay. Street lighting budget primarily covers the expenses for.
No, I
Want me to
know,
wait
this
till
is
you get
without
to
the
that?
budgets. You do, it's 422. I offered to share.
Okay, are you ready, or? Charlie knows this, you can start with
Okay.
that.
So primary expenses here are for electric, and for maintenance. We pay electric fees on the Versant-owned lights, which are the ones that are primarily attached to telephone poles. And the city-owned lights are primarily on Main Street, High Street, Myrick Street, and Commerce Park. Those are the more decorative style lighting. Those are city-owned, so we're responsible for those electric and maintenance. I'm asking for more power budget this year because that will align better with the actuals we've been expending. And I've asked for more maintenance because we need to replace a Main Street pole that fell over. So it rusted out. So we need to replace that. It's about $10,000, so that's the additional maintenance request there. And I'll say to Jim has actually been helping out a lot with the street lighting lately. He replaced some lights on Main Street for me and all that, so he's been picking up some of that slack.
I know that there's outlets on the Main Street lights at the top.
Mhm.
Did those all get fixed this past year?
They did.
Excellent.
All been replaced.
That's
Oh,
exciting.
wow, that's great.
That's why we had Christmas lights on all the poles this Christmas, so.
There were a couple of poles that even with the new outlet, they still didn't work, so we still need to troubleshoot that, but we'll take care of that when the weather's nice.
Were they replaced, the streetlights with LEDs a couple years ago, or is that still?
Main Street, it's been LED for several years. High Street has not been converted. We need to look into doing that. And we also need to work on the Versant lighting to convert, and I actually talked to Mike Harris about this. We're gonna work on the RFP to get the street lighting switched. And at the same time, I'd like to convert the High Street decorative lights to LEDs as part of that same project. That one company that comes in to do that can just do that too. We did Myrick Street, Lisa was here, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. And Commerce Park is already LED. There's only 3 lights up there anyway, but.
I imagine still that was a huge power savings. in that
Yeah,
period.
it's Myrick Street was incredible, the amount of power savings, and half of them were out, and we still saved a ton of money even on half compared to switching to LED, so, it makes a big difference. So,
I have 2 questions for you on this. Why are only certain streets listed here? They're the only city-owned?
Yes.
So what's the story with the rest of the streetlights?
so the other streetlights are all owned by Versant, and we rent them, lease them, I don't know how you wanna phrase it, but we pay them a set fee per light, and they maintain them, essentially.
So where does that cost show up?
That's in the, just power, so it's all listed
Okay,
under
that's the power
rate.
charge, okay, thank you. And the other thing, particularly when you're talking about transitioning, is how do you factor dark skies?
So, and when we did Myrick Street, we specified that they had to be dark sky compliant. And in any other conversions we do, we'd also specify that as well.
Great, fabulous, thank you. I remember this from last year when you talked about when we're coming down 1A and you get by, or 1A relics and you can see Ellsworth from 4 miles away. You know, you're almost home, but still, it does not need to glow quite as intensely. It's a waste, and there's a lot of,
Yeah, that was important for me
Benefits
when we
to it.
did Myrick Street, to make sure whatever we got was, because the original proposal was not, and
Right.
I had them change that. So Myrick Street was done that way. I don't know about the Main Street lights, those were done quite a few years ago, so I don't know if those are compliant or not, but,
great, thank you.
yeah.
Has Versant been a good partner, and if you let them know something's down, they come pretty?
Yeah, they've actually been pretty responsive, especially if you fill out the form on their website. They seem to respond to that better than a phone call. I don't know why, but it works better. It's more convenient for me anyway.
Traffic signals, 429.
All right. Traffic signals. We have primarily electric for the signals, maintenance and engineering services. We have 12 traffic signals in the city. And the interesting thing about the traffic signals is that they are owned by Maine DOT, but we are responsible for maintaining them and keeping them lit. And with that said, I'll point out that in 2028, fiscal year 28, Maine DOT is planning to do a pilot project with the city of Ellsworth. They're already doing it with some other communities, but bringing Ellsworth into a pilot project where they will reimburse us a certain amount of money per signal for that maintenance agreement. They've been really happy with how we've maintained our signals, and they want to start rewarding communities that do a good job. So that's their plan. And I looked in the work plan, and they have $99,000 in there in FY '28. I don't know if that's just for these signals in Ellsworth, or if it's for the signals in Ellsworth, Trenton, and Bar Harbor. But either way, it seems like a good amount of money. So that's something positive coming. As far as this year goes, I have decreased the electric line because we are to align it with the actuals we've been expending. And I'm looking for additional maintenance because we've been seeing more maintenance needs. Despite what's reflected in the year-to-date, I just approved another invoice for almost $2,500. And there's some others that are coming down the line that I've been putting off for spring. So there will be more, we'll probably be over on maintenance this year, most likely. And I plan to keep the maintenance funding, the engineering funding flat. And I plan to work with Sebago Technics this spring. So you'll see I haven't expended any of the engineering money for this year, but that will be expended this spring. I'd like to develop some new timing plans for the north end of town. High Street, Main Street, Oak Street, and High School, and Lower Light. So those seem to be the bottlenecks. The other end of town seems to be working pretty well. So I'm gonna let that ride for right now, and just focus on this end of town, especially evening getting out. So you may have noticed that it gets backed up sometimes.
I also noticed a traffic light out here in the hallway on Monday night.
I signed up for middle school STEM night next week. I'm gonna do a traffic light display. So I had one in storage. That one was at Shaw's intersection, and it actually fell, it broke. So I had it in storage, and I figured someday it might be useful, and now it is.
That's great.
I think they'll be interested. It's when you see one up in person how big they are. So you don't realize when they're 18 feet up in the air. So
Much smaller.
When you're done with it, can we install in here?
I put it right there.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, we.
3 minutes are up.
Minute mark?
Like 2 minutes it goes yellow and
I did go into Jason, I was like, for this purpose, I was like, what if we did like a certain amount of time for each department, and then I'll click,
Yeah.
and then we'll have a countdown clock, and I'll start flashing red at everybody, but we've been okay. We've been okay in timing.
COBI.
COBI, which is community-owned broadband infrastructure. It is our fiber optic network. We have approximately 5 miles of fiber. It was installed originally around 2016, 17, with a Northern Borders regional grant. So we are responsible for maintaining and management of the network, so documentation and things like that. The other part of that is there's also an equipment shelter that sits down on Water Street. In that shelter is where all the fiber is terminated, and there's equipment racks in there for different providers to use and lease space. We're currently leasing space in this shelter to GWI, Union River Telephone, Pioneer Broadband, which is actually Holton, and Network Maine. And we also, as the city, we use the fiber fairly extensively for our own sites. The police department's on it, several traffic signals, the water department at Ingalls Mall. We actually did a wireless link from the traffic light at Walgreens to the mall. So we were using it for several things on our own. And this year it's it's a wash. I think we increased power a little bit. No, insurance. We increased insurance, but that was offset with a decrease in miscellaneous expense.
So in all those people, we only bring in $8,000 from rentals?
We do not lease very much. We make more from providers that don't even offer service in Ellsworth than we do from GWI, who does offer service in Ellsworth. So there's no interest in it. And even less now with things like Fidium. Fidium has pretty much covered the entire city, almost. Now, I don't want to say everyone, because there are some pockets that aren't.
Yeah.
But for the most part, at this point, the city of Ellsworth is covered. And what we learned with a lot of the businesses on the High Street corridor, which is where our fiber primarily is, they typically have agreements with national companies for their service, like the McDonald's's and those kind of things. So there was no interest in partnering with GWI for that. And the other thing we found was, once GWI signed on, no one else was interested. So the open access concept seems nice on paper and in theory, but they don't all play nice together. So it didn't work out like we had hoped. But we use it extensively, so it's not for nothing. And we're making some revenue off of the rack space. You know, the Pioneer Broadband uses us as a repeater site to get to for their backup loop to Holton. Union River Telco has some equipment in there to provide us service. Network Maine has 2 racks in there. And we're committed to Network Maine for another 12 years, I think. So no matter what, we're stuck for 12 years doing it.
So it's about $1,000 each that they pay?
Yeah, it depends on how much rack space, it depends on how many rack units they take, how much equipment they put in there. And then GWI as the provider pays per drop on top of that. And I can't remember what the rates are now, I haven't had to do a new one in a long time, but it's based on what they're using and how much of it, so. The rack space is more valuable than the actual drops, but, because there's less of it. But we've done what we can to make as much revenue with it as we can, but.
So I want to, I spent some time with this morning trying to understand it, like what the value add is. Why are we spending 25 grand net on this? So after talking to some people and then looking on the city website for what it is, I understand it better. And the key thing I've heard is we're locked into a contract for 12 years.
With Network Maine, yeah. So GWI, you're not locked in with GWI. You can offer, and it's open to any provider still. Any provider could come in today and say, hey, we want to get on. But it hasn't happened. No one else is interested.
But if you're looking at like what it provides and what it provides to the city, what's the value add and is it worth 25 grand?
I would have to do the math, but there is value there in the city properties that are connected. There's value there in the equipment that we have as a city hosted in the equipment shelter. But to the, yeah.
Is it good in an emergency too? Does it help us at all then?
Not really. I mean, it's in a facility that has battery backup power, it has its own generator, so I mean, the equipment that's a part of this is all very secure and redundant as it can be. So to the city operations, it has quite a bit of value. To the actual community outside of that, there's only a handful of businesses that are ever connected to it. So, no, I would be my answer, honestly.
So it's used by within the city police. Did I hear water, some traffic lights?
Yeah, so the water department uses it for their SCADA, their telemetry
Yeah.
communications. We have the police department connected to it. We have several traffic signals. And City Hall is connected. Library, the old superintendent's office was connected. There are several sites, city-owned sites that are using the fiber.
Could we string it up to the new courthouse location as a new?
So you could. I doubt they would use it. What future development up there, maybe. But again, you're gonna have probably Fidium and Spectrum go first. So.
We're not allowed to like monopolize, like we built this road, you can use just this internet.
No, and I don't think that probably would be a good idea.
Oh, come on.
Then you'd be a cable company.
Yeah, right?
I want to give a shout out to River.net.
Yep.
Formerly Maine-based, literally Union River, and now it's been bought out by another
Yeah, I heard they were bought out.
family-owned ISP, but I stuck with River.net because they're local, they're small, it's not a national
Yep, we,
corporate presence, and they're right downtown, and they were here before Fidium was.
Oh, yeah, we lease fiber from them in places where we don't have our own fiber. They're great to work with.
Yeah.
Hopefully that continues with the new company. But yeah, Ellsworth is actually pretty fortunate when it comes to fiber for the most part. There's a lot of fiber in Ellsworth.
At least in my neck of the woods, they've got plenty of options, so.
Now, again, I don't want to, there are places there isn't, so.
Yes,
Don't come at
and
me.
I hear from those folks too.
Yeah.
But, thank you, it was good to understand more about what this is and what the value add is
If-
and the fact that we've got,
If it went away, there would be several thousands of dollars in construction costs to bring in a consolidated or something like that to hook up the sites that we're using. So it has value there. I mean, and then the monthly cost, you know, to get a dark fiber drop from Consolidated is probably $1,000 a month.
Okay.
So, I mean, that adds up. And right now, we have this expense. And the biggest expense is power for that shelter, so, which is mostly heating and cooling. So you take that away, the equipment dies, but the bills would go way down. So, most of that's not an expense of owning the fiber, it's an expense of owning the little building
of
that's
keeping it
cool and
alive.
hot, yeah.
Okay.
Mostly cooling, it doesn't use much heat.
Yeah.
What are we paying? We get $10,000 for that little tiny building and the property that it sits on for insurance?
That is actually liability insurance for pole attachment agreement. So we were required to buy the attachment agreements from Versant and Consolidated to have a separate liability policy in order to attach to those poles. It's
Wow.
not something MMA would touch.
Would touch.
So we went out, this is actually the second insurance company, the first one was even more. And I actually talked to Pioneer Broadband and asked who they were using, and he recommended this new company, and they were much cheaper, but still very expensive.
Yeah, it is
For what it
expensive,
is,
isn't it?
yeah.
And then what do we do for maintenance on that little building?
So we have maintenance contracts on the HVAC units. And in the past 2 years, we've had very expensive repairs on those two HVAC units. We also do generator maintenance, so we have someone come in annually and maintain the generator. And that's pretty much it. But the repairs on the HVAC really were hard. I think we had a $6,000 repair on one of them this year.
Wow.
So it was a new evaporator. They both needed evaporators. The first one went 2 years ago, and then the other one went this year. So hopefully they're good for another 7 or 8 years. But and the other piece of that would be if we have to do any pole transfers, new telephone pole gets installed, we have to pay someone to come and attach it, take it from the old pole and put it on the new pole. So there's attachment transfers and things like that. So those aren't a lot of money, but they can add up if the project happens or something like that.
Jason, this building is at, down at the harbor, right?
Yeah, it's where the
Or
old
where the old
wastewater plant used to be. Yep.
Okay.
You're welcome to come by anytime. No one ever wants to see it.
I would actually be interested
Yeah,
in seeing it.
I'd love to show you guys. It's pretty cool.
It's about $3,000 a foot to maintain it. $30,000 is just a tiny building.
Solid concrete. A lot of cool tech in there. So.
Is it worth another outreach campaign to get other businesses to sign on or to figure out how to?
I just think there's so many options now. I honestly, you could try, but I don't think, there's just so much competition now, it's hard to compete.
Yeah, if we could do it cost effectively. You must have had Fidium coming to your house 8 times when they were putting in their
Almost as much as
stuff.
this.
Fidium Spectrum.
They're not.
Well, like I said, River.net, I call, and the lady who lives in the town that they're based in, somewhere
Yeah,
within 20 miles here.
Aurora, yeah.
Yeah.
They answer the phone. When I forget to pay my bill, they call me and say, you need to pay your bill. And I say, I'm telling, this is TMI, but the personal service you get with River.net has stayed so far, and we're probably 3, 4, or 5 months in with the new.
It's pretty good.
That's good. That's very
Spectrum was, my wife's 92-year-old grandfather had a house in Castine that's $170 a month for 56 megabyte internet and like 110 channels of
And
television that
and try
never
to-
got used.
try to cancel it.
I tried to cancel it. They like wanted me to get a social security card and all that. I ended up, shouldn't say this publicly like Michelle, but I ended up, oh, just skip McCain. Oh, God.
So one trick I have for canceling Spectrum is tell them you're moving to North Dakota. They don't offer service in North Dakota, so they won't even pay you. They won't, they'll just cancel.
Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm getting tired. We gotta move on.
I don't know if you've tried to
This is
cancel
coming
it.
It would be nice, this is a conversation for another night, but just those couple areas that you mentioned that we've all heard from people to try to figure out a way to help them.
Yes.
Connectivity
There is a
issues.
broadband committee working on it, yeah.
Yeah, I wish we had more power to do, or to convince the PDMs or the Spectrums to do something. And we also need to get, Union River to get their map updated so that that's not throwing off the data. That's really what's messing them up on Graham Way, so.
Let me know if there's anything I can do.
Yeah, I know Janet tried really hard and we pushed and it just, that, I don't know if they don't understand the issue, I don't know what the problem is, but, yeah.
I was on that committee and trying to get information from them of
Providers are very
providers and
protective.
what those maps are,
Yeah.
it's worse than pulling teeth. You just can't get it.
Yeah,
You just, and what you do get isn't really accurate, so
right.
it's incredible.
I'll put in a plug for the Maine Broadband Coalition, part of the work we do, and this is what we live on, pole attachment, ISPs, being unresponsive maps, not being updated,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because they were, representative from the coalition was on that committee with me.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was just, it's incredible. I mean, you'd think it would be so easy, but it's like getting ambulance information evidently.
We'll get it. Or maybe not. The Econ Dev.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks,
yeah,
Jason.
thanks, Jason.
I do wanna see that building.
853.
Yeah, field trip.
Oh, it's way in the back.
So I'm stepping in here. We, as I mentioned, the previous city council meeting, we had about 40 applications for the economic development director role. We finishing next week. We'll be finishing the first round interviews with the final 5 candidates. In the meantime, Jeremy Smith has been hired on a contract basis. He's a ton of municipal experience and YMCA experience. He's helping me out on a variety of fronts, including the Econ Dev budget, TIF funding, which in some ways I think could help inform like a further iteration of this economic development budget, which we'll talk about next. And Parks and Rec, and an MOU with the YMCA, and a bunch of other things we'll talk about kind of later in the cycle. But pretty straightforward on the Econ Dev budget this year. We're down in funding just a little bit. There's a bunch of consultants hired last year for a variety of things, so, but we're still at the same level with professional services. We've just switched to more of the TIF district reimagining, which we'd put in $25K there for to really start looking into our TIF districts, which we'll talk about next. Got some interesting news there to really maximize the TIF potential, potentially expand TIFs. We could edit existing TIFs. But this tax incremental financing, we've talked a little about potential credit enhancement agreements. Do we want to do economic development TIFs? Do we want to do housing TIFs? Like, it's an opportunity to really kind of maximize spending in those categories. The economic development budget is funded entirely through TIF, but this year there really isn't much change except there's the VPI initiative, kind of finishing the costs for there, the housing task force, the TIF plan review and update, which I mentioned. We'd probably be able to figure out with this, around the 60,000 level, which is a little bit less than last year. Also some wayfinding signage in production. And we'll talk in facilities later on. We put the IRCI program facility over there. That being said, I think this budget could change around a bit because there's potential some surplus TIF funding from this year that we may want to consider a budget reallocation to fund some of these things in the more near term, both in this budget and in planning. So I'll kind of pause for a second on Econ Dev, but it's really kind of the TIF budget, and going through that I feel like would be the most valuable for time to kind of look at and what this could fund. But Ashley, I don't know if you have any questions first on Econ Dev. Let's go to TIF then. The Word document would be great. So if you could go to the Word document, and a big thanks to Jeremy Smith. I'm going to take credit here for a lot of his work. Again, this is kind of preliminary analysis, so we've got to dive a little deeper. But
So this is the memo.
this is the memo.
Yeah, I had it somewhere, I just don't know where.
I've got an extra one.
No, it's okay, really, I know what a TIF is.
But you've got some new information. You're going to want
All
this.
right.
I'll bring this back. It's not big. This is too. So you know what a TIF is. I know Tabitha being new, it's we had a long conversation about this today. I think I'm like 95% now. I was at 42% last year, getting 95. It's revenue, it's an expense, it's,
They're magic.
it's basically, you designate an area, and you essentially shelter the tax increase in that area. It could be for a credit enhancement agreement that adds as it grows in value. It doesn't actually increase in value to your state valuation, so it doesn't hurt your revenue sharing. And then the increased valuation is kind of sheltered and pulled apart and then designated for specific things. There's a lot more information, especially we put in the memo, which we'll add to the budget to be online, about what the TIFs are, how the credit enhancement agreements work. But most importantly is our current TIFs. So there's the map of our 4 TIFs that we have. And it shows, if you want to go to the next page there, Ashley, or maybe one more page, to the maps. There we go. So the ones that are kind of in green, that is our Beckwith Hill Economic Development TIF. That's what funds the economic development budget, and some debt service on some economic development, previously related activities, which we'll get into in a second. The yellow one is the Leonard Lake Senior Housing TIF, has the expiration dates for these areas. The orange one is the Oriole Way Senior Housing Credit Enhancement Agreement, and the red Oriole Way Affordable Housing Credit Enhancement Agreement as well. The biggest one to talk about, if we go to the next page, is kind of TIF number 1, which is Jeremy is good. It's a large, flexible omnibus TIF with no credit enhancement agreement, meaning it doesn't go to like a specific developer. That increase in value from that area comes to the city, allowing us for a broad range of uses for the collected tax revenue. FY25, after Jeremy kind of reviewed with Larry, our tax assessor, of the total taxes kicked off by that TIF, kind of realized that there's about $170,000 that remained unallocated for this year, meaning that the amount of revenue generated or taxes generated from that property, we saw in that hockey stick of $500 million increase over the last 6 years. These TIF areas are affected by that too. Those are now kicking off additional funding. I think the expectation is, when folks weren't exactly aligning on capturing these, that it wasn't, they thought there was this much money for economic development activity. Actually, there was $170,000, potentially more. Now, this money can be encumbered over, so for very specific purposes. But in other news, there's some of the debt service on Beachland and Knowlton Park, which is around $237,000, is also retiring, which for next year now, the unallocated, again, even if all the econ dev budget stays the same, we still have about $400,000 in additional unallocated TIF because of the retirement of debt service and the $170,000 of increased revenue based on the increased valuation of the property. So it's a pretty substantial amount of TIF, but it has very specific things it can be used on. It can't be used just to reduce the tax rate. That's kind of how they're designed. Jeremy put a great, he really did a lot of research into actually these, these agreements themselves, what they're allowed to be used for, and to me, there's an interesting opportunity to, now that we kind of have this, is to come back to the table, look at some of the next year's requests that we could start moving forward with now, especially on some of the TIF district reimagining, SIP planning, the ordinance change piece, and really I can get RFPs out on those pretty quickly, and let's start kicking the tires on those very critical economic development and long-term infrastructure planning pieces that, really time is of the essence for, which would still leave a fair amount to be potentially encumbered over, but I want to kind of look through the budget on as many things that we were thinking about doing next year that we can pull off having to ask for new tax revenue on, which could limit some of the new request asks. The other side of this is it listed here? There's potential for programs, events, marketing, staffing. I know Cara's here from the Heart Ellsworth. There's a request for potential TIF funding there. That's a potential use. We're thinking about an increased partnership with the YMCA. But, while these are like general broad, there's a lot of specificity and how much can be spent on each piece. So to me, this, and especially with the note on the Parks and Rec Department that we've been talking about and the Parks and Rec Director, this really could be, is very much in line with that type of thing. You'll see, there's recreational trails, environmental improvements, grant matching, improvements to the downtown TIF Portage District, water sewer lines, streetscape improvements. There's also road improvements can be used with this type of funding. So, I'm with especially the large focus this cycle on really the only new request is going to be the Parks and Rec Director as kind of the bigger piece, which we pre-funded with about, I think it was $45,000 from last year. Jeremy and I are working on, what a Parks and Rec Director budget would be, including some of this. This could be upgrades, I think, to Knowlton Park. We've, Parks and Rec Director to kind of lead the process of deciding and working with the community on what those upgrades should be and how we can move quickly there. Same thing with the harbor. The Rec Commission has, wants sort of a permanent or semi-permanent parklet to really kind of upgrade that piece. I put this into the placemaking category. That's, in the comp plan, business attraction plan, these pieces. I hate to say it, but a few business owners mentioned to me about lack of beautification on High Street. We didn't mulch things. We didn't, that it was looking kind of shabby. And one business owner said, "Is Ellsworth broke or something?" We got millions of people driving down these areas, and we're not taking care of our public.
Well, that's the Thriving Communities project is specifically for that and the bunch on High Street.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where this can kind of be the bridge the gap.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, and there's sort of the longer term Thriving Communities, VPIs, which are probably like, in the 4 to 6 years out before, we kind of see things in the ground. And this TIF itself could really help increase that. Jeremy and I also talked, this TIF's currently at like a 67% capture rate. If we wanted to capture more, we could potentially think about going to 100%. But there's a lot more research I want to do here to kind of align this to current needs, to take off the budget, to increase our Parks and Rec, beautification, placemaking, trails, really kind of that increased quality of life for the citizens that are here, and for those who visit us as well, that I really think could be a game changer. And when you see something like this too, as we look towards TIF district reimagining, and we're trying to help spend more money on these types of pieces, could there be a TIF district for our kind of marina area between the marina and here? And could that help fund a Riverwalk? Could we, the WS development area, we haven't seen those pad sites development. Could those be a credit enhancement agreement type thing to pull in more? Is that, I know Michelle, is that the type of thing the city wants to do? Because we don't typically partner with businesses on a credit enhancement agreement, or we haven't in the past.
There used to be state law that we couldn't use credit enhancement agreement for retail op services. Maybe that law's changed, but we couldn't do it. And could we get a copy of the current plan that shows what we can spend the money on currently?
Yeah, they're like the full, not just the breakdown, but the full.
Yeah, but the full that says, it has a list of, these are the things that we can use the TIF money for currently?
Yeah, Jeremy
Are
has.
you saying the list that the state has that's recommended, or the one that's actually in the agreement that the city has?
Right, the one that, we have a TIF development plan that was approved by the state of Maine. This says what we can
Yep,
use.
so this is the condensed version, so that spreadsheet right there.
I was just reading it, but.
Which shows within district, outside district, and municipal wide.
It shows what we use it for, but.
Those are the ones that are
But
in.
it's a more of a description of what you can use it for. That's what I was looking for. I know what we're using it for, but.
Well, this was the list of what you can use it for.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Not
thought it was
that
what we were
we,
using it for.
not that we are using it for. It's-
Oh, okay.
This is the full list of
I
can.
misunderstood
Yeah.
it. That's-
So the one that's in the gray section on the left side that says project costs, tip number 1, project costs, that list is what's allowed per the agreement.
Okay.
And then on the right side of that graph where it says FY '26, FY '25, that is what we used it on last year and proposed for this year's budget.
So those two charts don't flow together, they're separate
No.
charts.
Yeah.
That was
Let's
confusing.
squish them together to fit on the page.
Yeah, this is just kind of current use and the undedicated amounts. So it's really just being used for the economic development budget, a bit for the city manager's budget, debt services on these areas, ERKI, and then based on the new amount of capture, 170,000 that was undedicated this year, and either will need to be encumbered over into a separate account, and we've had finance create a separate bank account so we can start making sure that those are allocated and sheltered and appropriately, because they're restricted, they're not allowed to be used for anything. And then next year, because of the debt service retirements, there'll be an additional piece, which really seems very much in line with a lot of Parks and Rec, beautification, arts, that type of thing. But to your point, Michelle, too, this is like the general of allowed use per that agreement, but, it is more detailed and.
Yeah, can I just get a copy of that?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
just
because
can't
I'm
remember.
having some questions about recreation.
Me too,
Like, I looked at here recreational trails, but I don't remember anything about actual recreation, so.
Yeah, me too.
Because I think we would have done the entire Knowlton Park, but we pulled out the recreational trails for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had programs, events, marketing, and staffing. And then the other piece was we can alter the TIF. You can amend these TIFs as well. So
Yeah.
that's also something for potential consideration as we.
I just would like to see the whole of it.
Yeah.
I can't remember that far back.
Come on, Michelle.
I know.
You can't
that's
remember
all
a
right.
detailed.
The uses under the outside district, those are still potential, or outside districts are only able to be used in certain circumstances?
Didn't we
Compared
use-
to within district?
Didn't we bond part of the Beachland Road?
Yeah, Beachland Road, because it was a direct result of the economic development TIF because of Myrick
I
Street.
just don't see it on here.
It's the debt
So we-
service retires on that one.
Yep,
Oh, that's it, that
that's the
retires
Beachland
already.
Road right there.
Project cost there.
So is this the agreement?
Mhm.
Okay. Can you send that to me? I can read it that way. Don't send it to the Ellsworth Maine, because that doesn't work. I'll get you my,
Or if you want to just send it to me and I'll forward it on.
oh, okay,
Look
thank
at
you.
this.
Speaking
Might
of
be easier.
IT, don't we need?
That's not gonna get spammed, no way. So yeah, there's a little more work to do, especially, as it relates to the current budget too, on, I'd love Michelle to kind of follow up and, there was a variety of areas in the comp plan, business attraction plan, that, feels like, could be in line here to really start making some good headway on. And, also I think kind of kicks the tires on, let's get some more TIFs just like this, or for specific pieces. There's, we also need to do kind of analysis on like maximizing the TIF, so what it could be. So I think there was, Jeremy and I talked earlier, there's, maybe 50% of our total acreage is what we're at right now on initial calculations, but would want to do, I think in some ways Elders is, as the largest municipal landmass, we're kind of blessed with
Very
how
fortunate.
they design these TIFs is like, that's pretty good for a giant landmass like us.
Yeah.
Plus, but then there's also like a total amount of dollar capture. You can't just, take your entire value. All this money is sheltered does not count against our state valuation for any increases in those areas, so it's not gonna hurt our revenue sharing. So seems like this is a very good one to start maximizing this value, and then especially while we have these two experts here, to look at our next two.
Tammy's the expert on this.
She won't allow me to give her nickname anymore.
She's the tip person.
So yeah, I excited about this. I think it's there's also, I think, a level of kind of part of the budget. I'd like to really stick towards what are the pieces that we already have in here we're planning on doing that we wouldn't have to put in the next year. Let's get that. But then this doesn't have to be the budget cycle here. Like we can encumber over as we develop a Parks and Rec director. They may, if the council were to move forward with that.
It's not locked into the fiscal year?
No, we can encumber over, we can do a separate budget allocation to decide, like, this is what we'd like to, and in some ways, we might have to do something like that with the 170,000 undedicated this year, if we
Well,
want to move
the
forward.
TIF fund is a fund, though, you don't
Yeah,
encumber it.
no, you
I don't
don't
have
have to
to-
encumber it.
You don't encumber it.
It just
Oh,
becomes
that's
its
right,
own.
just sits,
It
sorry.
just
Yeah.
sits there, so when you say there's 170,000 from this year, it might
Yeah.
be cumulative.
Just sits there, but we recently added an account so we can actually do that, so, yeah, so we'll just, encumbering meaning, yeah, just, it hangs out there, it's in its own place, we don't have to go now, but I would have to do a budget allocation on that with council, I mean, I can't just
Right.
spend.
It's not meant to be taken up every single year in projects, because you may have a project coming up that you want to do a big grant match or something, and you want to have some surplus. You don't want to bring it down to zero every year, or else you won't accumulate to enough to have a big project or something.
Yeah, but,
But that's just the way I got it.
yeah, and we haven't been, there's been no TIF fund that's been set aside for some time now.
The other thing that I do worry about with TIF funds, and especially if you use them down every year, is eventually that TIF runs out, or it becomes smaller, and you get a ledge, because you had something that you paid for, and now you can't do it anymore, you've got a ledge, and you've got to bring that money back up. It's kind of like using fund balance or things like that to
Yeah, but if you
pay
add
for
more
ongoing
TIFs,
projects.
if you add more TIFs to keep going, and because we have that room.
But isn't there a 20-year, is that not anymore too?
Yeah, no, it's still, what they're talking about is redoing it. You can actually amend your TIF in the middle of a TIF.
And then get another 20
And it will go
years.
another 20 years. so-
Even on the same lots?
Tip on tip.
Is it on the same lot?
10-year maximum is usually what it is. I'm sorry, what was the question?
So it used to, like I said, it's been 10 years. It used to be you had a 20-year TIF.
Yeah.
And you can amend it.
Depending on how it's set up.
Right.
And when you amend it, it's still the same time frame typically, but you can also include a affordable housing into a TIF, and then that'll extend any TIF by usually 10 years, 5 to 10 years.
But when you amend it, can you use the same lots, or do you have to change the district in order to get the next 20 years?
Either one,
Either one?
yeah. If you want to increase the size
So,
of the TIF.
and sorry, Jay, could you come to the podium just?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Or the table.
Or the table, it's.
So, and when does our current TIF run out?
I think it's
It's
2032.
on there.
This one expires
Oh,
in
yeah.
June of '33. This economic development one.
Because that was the last amended one that we did. But
I think we
But-
added years because it was 20 and then we changed it to 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's, now that we're not allocating to these debt services, and we got a lot of deferred maintenance on beautification and upgrades to these areas, I think we all heard about it with Nolan Park last year. So how do we get within allowed use, but then also, how do we layer in more TIFs so we're not,
Yeah, so you don't have the cliff that Michelle was talking
yeah,
about.
so we had a new affordable housing one, we had maybe a new economic, are you allowed to have multiple economic development ones at once?
Yeah, so as long as the size of the TIF isn't greater than 2% of your overall land mass, and collectively, all the TIFs together aren't more than 5% of your overall land.
Okay. So you can't have one and you were about 2.5% of total land.
Collectively, the TIFs that Ellsworth has is at 2.5% of the overall land mass of Ellsworth.
Something for the courthouse in the future.
Yeah, that whole kind of Wardwell property
Something
could be in
there.
there, that's why I said, like, gut, Wardwell property area, WS development to try to get more, not retail store that would be there, that, to your point, I think that might be, but, it might be a special, or maybe it could be this downtown area to encourage a hotel space, which is on there, we don't have down here, maybe that could be, a credit enhancement agreement to lure a developer in, residential housing along the waterfront for mixed-use retail, that could also kick off funding for a Riverwalk, all kinds of fun stuff that I'd love somebody who's an expert in.
Yeah, ideally, you'd want to set up a TIF where there's going to be a significant increase in the value that's put into that land. So if it's empty land or undeveloped land or an older building, you set that original assessed value, and then whoever the developer is improves that, then that change is what you're going to capture and then allocate towards these project costs.
So-
And so that's where you get the best value, and you're also sheltering that much more money and incentivizing more developers to come
because, just that as the businesses grow, then more businesses are gonna, want to be here.
Yeah, it's like we
Ideally.
did the Duxport Road, because we were hoping that we could get a TIF in that lower part, and then be able to put sewer pumps and things up like that with the residuals, but it's not enough interest in it. So the economic development TIFs are through DECD, the housing TIFs are through Main State Housing, correct?
Yes.
You can't, so the economic development TIF is 2% of the land mass, and then the 2.5% of the Main State Housing, you can't combine the two.
So when they look at the land mass, they look at both CEAs and the TIF districts collectively.
Collectively.
Yeah, but if they're
So
looking
this-
at the OAV, they only look at the economic development, the proper TIFs.
Right, so.
We'll call them an MTIF as opposed to just the TIF. So
Sorry,
there's
what's OAV mean?
Original assessed value.
Original assessed value.
Yeah.
So I just was wondering, because so if you have both kinds of TIFs, you can increase the amount of economic development TIF you have more than 2%?
Up to 5% collectively. So they will look at the CEAs for the overall amount of that 5% limit, in addition to the TIFs.
The combined TIFs can't.
Yeah, combined.
Whether it's housing.
But any
economic
single TIF
development.
can't be more than 2%. All the TIFs combined can't be more than 5%,
Okay.
So
whether they're CEAs or
Or
MTIFs.
MTIFs, okay.
Yeah.
to me, and I talked to folks, and I just did an interesting whiteboarding session about like the guns and butter problem, which to me Ellsworth is kind of in, which, we've looked at our, spending, and there's been some big increases, and I did a 5-year analysis. It's like, we have the comp plan, we have all these other things. You'd think we'd be doing a massive expansion in these kind of, but then you see what we're spending our money on, and it's public safety. We saw that today. It's like, wow, those are multi-million-dollar increases per year. That's an incredible amount of where the budget's going. And when I say guns and butter, there's kind of this idea in economics, microeconomics, on like, take a country that can only produce two things, and they do guns and they do butter, and the more guns you want to produce, the less butter you can produce. And in some ways, the city's kind of like in public safety. That's gonna consume, and there's these collective bargaining that's gonna continue to consume a lot of the tax rate. The TIF seems to be an opportunity to kind of produce both, to get public safety and a big section of the budget that's sheltered from the tax valuation, because you're working off the increases, so it's not really hurting the rest of the budget, but it's also providing a lot of economic development activity, housing activity, specific project activity, and so to me, this is like this is an area I really want to focus on in this year, is ordinance changes, TIF, district reimagining potentially, the SIP side of things, grants manager to kind of maximize non-Ellsworth taxpayer pieces. I'll give up on the parking kiosk for millions of dollars in revenue, but.
Just keep mentioning it though, so people know
Just
that.
keep mentioning that.
That's not there.
It was Sean's idea. So yeah, I'm excited about this. We'll come back more. I feel like in the near term, there's what can qualify here that's already in our budget that we don't have to put in next year's budget to limit. And then the second piece is gonna be, what could, to your point, Michelle, are there limitations on rec type activities? Is it some types of rec? It does say staffing in here. It does say, but is it that type of staffing? If it's feathering the city manager's budget in a piece, I do a lot of economic development activity. I just presented an economic development budget. The rec department, I've actually thought of could report to an economic development director, and and a lot of cities do have community and economic development, arts, recreation, that piece kind of together with a strong ... over to Public Works, of course. So, exciting stuff. Any other questions before we end it?
I can't wait for the TIF workshop.
Me too.
I wasn't being sarcastic.
I know. I kind of understand it now.
This is the good stuff.
You're getting there. I think I'm like 97% now. I think
Getting closer, huh?
After today.
When I first saw him, you were like 50%
Yeah.
today, and now you're at 97.
Thanks to Jeremy. Last year I did show, we had a whiteboard as we were trying to budget for this, because it's a revenue, it's an expense, and how do you, They just had all these whiteboarding sessions in the war room, people with complicated things, but I think we're getting there.
What's the downside of a TIF?
We
It
should
doesn't really
then-
sound like there's much bottom line.
Yeah, you don't maximize it for the right
It
things.
takes money out of your tax rolls to spend money on other things. So if we didn't have that
Your
tax,
regular
that would
budget.
be, right, your regular, you're saving, you're taking money out of taxes,
Yeah.
really and truly, and you're putting it to, you're sheltering it
Yeah.
from revenue sharing and things, but you're putting it to specific projects rather than having it help apply to the entire city for all of the expenses within the city.
Yeah, so you are,
So you have to be, you do have to be careful with it.
it's almost like tax-free money, essentially. Like you use it on regular city things as regular taxes, it's at X value, you use it on economic development activity, it's like sheltered from the taxes, like, or the revenue increases. It's not really actually taxes, but it's, that's the way I've mentally been able to think about that type of money, is it's worth 130% more than, you know, a dollar that you would typically be taxed on.
And there's calculations that show like how much you are sheltered and what the difference would be if you didn't have those assessments sheltered.
But
What
in
the
an
effect
ide-
would be in, right, on your subsidies and such, so.
Although in an ideal world, especially in a place like Ellsworth that's experiencing hockey stick growth, if you're sheltering more, you're adding more, you're also, you know, when you have better parks, you have better this, you have better that, you're getting so much more increased activity and new businesses as well, that like in the non-TIF districts that are also coming here, building new retail, building new this that can't be TIF'd, is, you know, you're just increasing your valuations in a lot of other areas.
And you're right, the key is investing it so that it is doing that kind of growth.
Right.
When we have it in its
Or
own little
in key
account.
priority projects like housing.
Yep.
Like economic development, so,
Right, absolutely.
yeah.
We should end at that high point, and I know there's one more thing on the agenda. That was a really.
Was there?
Yeah. No, actually, we were done.
City manager.
Oh, the city manager budget.
It's not important.
Oh, mine's, yeah,
I know, I added the new stuff.
Yeah, we should end it on TIF. That's a great one to end on.
Yeah. You'll learn next year, and on the tips on this night. What page
Did you
are we
want to say
on?
something, Laura?
I just have a question.
67.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just a quick question. So Cara Romano, Heart of Ellsworth, Executive Director. Is it true that a downtown TIF, if you don't already have one, does not count against the rest of the TIFs in the city?
I don't know.
In the percentage of area,
Sorry, if we could have you at the
Yes.
microphone.
that is not true.
Okay, well, I have heard from two different towns that I've been researching, both Orono and, Old Town and Bath, that is the truth. So I guess as a follow-up to that, I'm wondering if that is in fact true and we find out that it is, why is the downtown, or can we consider the downtown district to be a TIFs district? And would that perhaps help us?
I will put this in the, like, let me look into it.
Thank you.
You know, that 100%, I think, yeah, the downtown should be considered as that if we're trying to encourage more investment and growth downtown, especially if it doesn't count against us. But let me look into it more.
But even if it does, it's gotta be such a small percentage of total land mass. It wouldn't-
6.5.
The
6.5
downtown
acres?
is 6.5%
Well,
of.
no, acres, and that is the proposed historic district right now, that's on the table, it's 6.5 miles.
Of what are we, like 90 something?
Yeah, but then you also have to increase the valuation that, to Michelle's point, and it's gonna pull tax off.
Yes.
That would be an area that would potentially increase in a lot of value.
That's
And
true, too. Is there
and the
gonna be
retail piece, a lot of it,
incremental
I don't know,
value?
that's an interesting question.
The thing is that when you create your district, it's that point is the value. So unless you're planning on having construction or something to increase the value, you're not
Can
going
I
to be able
suggest
to.
this
Well, yeah,
problem
yeah, I
solving
think
for
we're
another
getting-
night?
Yes, thank you, Nancy, we.
It is now 9:20,
Yep,
we
yep.
are in problem
Yeah, we're
solving
in
because we
problem
love to
solving.
solve problems.
Will do.
But we're gonna be back here at 8 AM for finance, so I'd like to go home at some point.
City manager budget's pretty straightforward this year. You'll see kind of decrease from FY '24, but that's, like, they were including other things in the city manager's budget then, so it's a slight increase over the previous year, but most of that's due to the addition of the deputy city manager, which will go for the full year, is being budgeted for. In some ways, as we discussed last cycle, when we decided to add the deputy city manager back again, which the former one is sitting a couple seats away from me now. We also didn't go forward with hiring a finance manager, which was approved in the initial budget for FY '25. So it wasn't a full cost savings there, but that helped defer the cost for FY '25, and now it's in the city manager budget for FY '26. The payroll stipend, I also decreased pretty substantially. When I came in as city manager, that's one of the things that was at like 101,000. There was 20% turnover.
Yeah.
Stipends were sort of, hey, you do these 3 other things, you do these, so there was a lot of that activity. We've had about 10% turnover this last year, but most of that now I'm just kind of including in, for if we lose the planner and our assistant planner has to take up more work, like the planning budget can kind of self-sustain because that planning budget has enough payroll to add to the assistant planner. So I don't really feel like we need to utilize the stipend budget unless it's, there's a new activity that has to happen, which does occur as well. So that's why a big decrease there.
Why do we need a payroll stipend line?
It's-
If you feel like you're pretty comfortable with where everyone's at, and if we're short one person and it comes, like you said, the planning is coming out of their budget.
Yeah, it's, there are times when it's not necessarily in that department's budget, and we could do like a reallocation. There's just a new activity we need to do, so it has been used this cycle for any time it falls outside of that. Like, we need this person to do this activity. Again, that was something that was previously done to great extent. I could probably drop it down though. We're at 17,000. I think hopefully we'll have even less turnover next year.
I just asked a question.
I could drop that to 20. If that would be. I'm happy to red pen something.
It was just,
Drop it to 20?
sure. Everyone okay with dropping it to 20? Okay.
Great. The other thing I do want to drop, which I saw in here, was employee appreciation. I just missed that at 2,800. We only are budgeting $100 per employee, so I'm going to bring that to 300. As much as I wanted to, I'm not trying to break the bank with, there's only 3 employees. That was something we decided last year as a council that we do. Some departments were doing employee appreciation and putting in specific line items. Some departments weren't at all, and we decided to make it flat, that we do $100 per employee in each department for employee depreciation at the discretion of the manager. We're putting it there. We'll bring that bit down to $300 instead of $2,800. And I think that was pretty much it.
I have a question on that. Do you want to leave that at 300, or do you kind of want a buffer? Just for like the weird things, like the extra appreciation, like from you.
No, we're good at 300.
Okay.
Yep. I did a couple trophies for the team for our football pool. We had the loser trophies. Tina got a skunk. She came in last place. It's a little gold skunk.
Oh my God.
Actually, Ashley's the big winner. She won the football pool.
It looks like an urn with a football.
There's no money.
It's awesome.
It says the Ellsworth Football League. I'm hoping like 10 years from now I can come back and they're still doing this trophy pass. Sorry, Michelle, you look like you had a question.
No, yeah, because you've got miscellaneous expense at 2,500 if you want to buy trophies and things like
Yeah.
that for weird things. Not
Okay.
weird, different.
Different type.
I'm getting really tired, I'm sorry.
It's all right. Yeah, the employee appreciation at 3, I'm fine just going all the way down to there.
Okay.
Yeah, and miscellaneous is a little more in that category. And then the other kind of addition here was the hospitality costs at 2,000. Something that wasn't budgeted this cycle, but it's in my contract for $2,000. And oftentimes people we need to do pizzas for this kind of thing, and it's in my contract to have take visitors that are here for some service to dinners and lunches, and but it was in my contract, but we didn't budget for it last year, so that's what that $2,000 piece is.
Are you belonging to ICMA?
Yes, and I think I have that in my line.
Is that part of the 500? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, it's in my line item notes for conferences now.
CMA.
Yep.
International City Managers.
International City Managers Association. I know Sarah and I put that in there somewhere.
These are dues and memberships.
Yeah, where's the dues and memberships?
I didn't see it, so it just said.
Memberships
it
for
just said,
professional, yeah, League of Towns, but also for, yeah, that'll fund ICMA.
ICMA, Town and City
Legal
Managers
teams.
Association.
I'm gonna add that in there. We try to be a little better about just every department adding like the specific names, not just saying whatever. So that if we leave and you're like, I wonder what the city manager needs to be signed up for, that you'd see ICMA, League of Towns, other pieces. So I'll add that in
Town and
there.
City Managers Association, those are all.
And actually, Sarah and I tomorrow, I won't be here for finance because we're going to the, I think the ICMA for, in Bangor for the managers, like, networking event. So we're going there in Bangor tomorrow, so we are members and it's,
ICMA or MTCMA?
MTCMA.
it's MTCMA.
MTCMA, yeah.
ICMA, MTCMA. It's something I hope to do more of this year. I think I was a lot of heads down, getting things under me, and Sue Lassard has been a great kind of mentor, and that's been a good kind of external partner. But now with a little more, next week I have like the first like week and months where there's multiple blocks of 1-2 hour periods of time to catch up on things. But I will fill it up quickly and hopefully with a lot more like that this coming year. So I know
You'll meet all, I don't know, how many municipalities, you have about 150 people in MTCMA.
And I know we did the human resources budget last time around, and we'll I want to get to the city council budget at some point. I have some changes there, but I've talked to Carrie there. I think maybe we would use another round for new counselors on, I think in April there's going to be a new counselor, like FOA training and those pieces, and folks that haven't done that in a while or are new, like to do that, I think really helpful. We just did a FOA training as a management staff here. It's always good to get a refresher course on, oh, that's what, like, you know, you think you know one piece on what it should be for one, and it's like, oh, that's the numbers that you can be talking at any one time, and all those fun little details. So important stuff. But I'll make sure all council is notified. We do have a fair amount in our training budget still. So. All right. Thank you all.
So we're moving legislative to next time, because it's on the budget for tonight. Not that I want to extend this, I just want to make sure we pick it up.
Oh, can we do it next time?
We can just bump it to the,
Yeah, let me just bump it to the next one.
Yep.
I wanted to make some changes.
I just don't want to lose it.
That's just the city council budget.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
next
who
one
cares
is,
about that? I mean,
I don't think this will take up the whole night.
I don't
We could
think it will
probably
either. We
hit
can
that real
probably do
quick,
some other,
yeah.
yeah,
As a warm-up.
It is half the budget. More than half.
legislative budget.
The school side.
We must be getting bigger stipend than we are.
thanks again for the
Yeah,
pizza.
great job.
Can I steal back the page numbers?
We're getting there.
See you next time.
Is this
Thank you,
the
guys.
page numbers?